Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Became Assassin's Creed in Game of Thrones movie. Before we start, please go support marioiale for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Chapter 1. In a dark room, there were 7 people. 5 stood in front of a table holding a map with various markings on it, while 2 knelt before them. Stand up, there's no need to kneel before us. Give us your reports. They both stood up and the first one spoke. I have news from King's Landing Grand Masters. Jon Aaron, hand to the king, has passed away. Rest in peace. The words were repeated among all those present before the man continued. King Robert and his family are preparing to leave for Winterfell, where the king plans to offer the job to Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. A heavy fist hit the table. Why should we care about who will become the next hand? The young man gulped as he looked at a man who was feared for both his strength and his ability to sneak up on him. I apologize, Grand Master A. The reason I'm bringing this to your attention is because the Masters in King's Landing have suspected foul play in Han's death. They request that a small squad be sent to investigate and take action if it is deemed to be Templar interference. Grandmaster A grunted before turning to his fellow Grandmasters. It wouldn't be the first time they've tried something like this. They've had their claws in King's Landing since Robert Baratheon was made king. I say we send as many squads as we can to purge the city of that scum. Calm down, A. Remember our words. A snort. So what are we supposed to do? Let them take over the city. Grandmaster Gaara placed his hand on A's shoulder in hopes of calming him down. We watch and wait from the shadows and intervene when necessary. Gaara turned to the young man in front of him. Go to Mentor Irika and he will assign you a team. Then you will rest before returning to King's Landing with the team. You are dismissed. The young man nodded before saying goodbye, and the second spoke. Great Masters, I bring you news from Lord Jiraiya. The blonde-haired Grand Master perked up upon hearing the name. What does the old toad have to say? The young man looked gloomy as he spoke. He has discovered that one of the last 2 remaining Targaryen children is preparing to invade the 7 kingdoms. A turned to Gaara and frowned. What do you have to say this time? Gaara remained silent, and it was Grand Master Inoki who spoke. The Targaryens are a family that should have all been burned when we found out the free lands allowed them to live. The dwarf assassin slammed his small but powerful fist on the table. I say I lead a unit into the free lands and make sure Robert Baratheon's work is done. Inoki went to give the young man an order, but the tall redhead at his side stopped him. How about we let the young man finish his report before we make any decisions? Inoki grumbled before signaling him to continue. Thank you, Grand Master May. Lord Jiraiya says that Viserys Targaryen has traded his sister, Daenerys Targaryen, to Khal Drogo of the Dothraki in exchange for 40,000 Dothraki soldiers. All the Grand Master's eyes widened. The Dothraki were feared warriors, so feared that even the Mad King never attempted a move against them. This may be true, but the Dothraki will never cross the narrow sea. Everyone turned to Gaara, who remained calm. But what if they do? The 7 kingdoms are too divided to defend against an attack of that magnitude. Inoki nodded in agreement. A is right. I say he and I go show the Targaryens that our mercy has reached the river's end. A nodded as he reached for his robe, but stopped when a fist hit the table, splitting it in half. Enough! Boy, what did Jiraiya have to say about that? Grandmaster Tsunade, Lord Jiraiya has asked Apprentice Master Naruto Uzumaki to meet with him in the city of Karth before heading out to infiltrate and observe the situation to determine whether or not it is a serious threat. Tsunade shook her head. No. Absolutely not. Naruto is nearing the end of his training to ascend to the rank of Master Assassin. I won't keep him waiting for a possible suicide mission. Do you know what the Dothraki will do if they find out he's a spy? Is it his training, or are you afraid he'll end up like his not-so-good father? May managed to restrain Tsunade before she could kill the dwarf assassin. You better watch your tongue, Inoki, before I cut it off. As much as it pains me to say, Inoki is right, Lady Tsunade. Naruto Uzumaki is the best our brotherhood has besides us at this table, or what's left of it. Tsunade turned her head at Gaara's words. I vote that we assign Naruto Uzumaki to the mission. All in favor, I say. A chorus of ayes from everyone but Tsunade rang out. It's decided. Temari! Kankuro! Go find Naruto. I think he's training with Master Guy. 2 hooded figures emerged from the shadows and left the room as Gaara turned to the young man. Rest for tonight. You and Naruto will leave at dawn. You're dismissed. Chapter 2. The Grand Masters stood at their table when the door opened and a hooded figure entered the room and made the long walk toward the Brotherhood leaders. When he got there, he bowed his head. Did you call me? Tsunade nodded. Yes, Naruto. Lord Jiraiya has personally requested you for a mission. Naruto Uzumaki raised his head. Naruto Uzumaki was just over 6 feet tall with spiky golden hair and bright blue eyes. His face was devoid of baby fat, and he had 3 whiskered birthmarks on both cheeks. His attire consisted of a long-sleeved black shirt and matching trousers, with black boots on his feet. Bracers covered his forearms, complete with fingerless gloves. On his shins were a pair of hardened leather greaves. Over this was his assassin robes, which was more of a coat that he designed like a custom haori. Naruto's haori was a charcoal color and had a pointed assassin hood instead of a high collar. The front of the haori had dark orange stripes running down the edges from the lapels to near the bottom, where the orange trim tapered towards the vertical edge of the coat. There were also 2 thin orange lines running from the lapels over his shoulders and down his back over his shoulder blades and further down to a split in the back of the haori, which allowed for easier movement. The 2 orange lines met at the top of the split, before running along the edges to the bottom edge of the haori. The 2 short sleeves of the haori also had an orange cuff at the end of the sleeve. Over this coat around his waist, he wore an orange sash, over which he had his supply belt with a belt buckle in the shape of the assassin emblem. He also had a second leather belt that ran diagonally over his right shoulder, down to his left hip, and back up again. Attached to the second belt was a sword. Finally, he had a hardened leather shoulder guard attached to the left shoulder of his haori. Naruto, you've shown exponential progress in your master training, but it's time we get it under control so you can complete this mission. Come on, Grandma, I just got some more things I need to complete, Inoki snorted. You will speak to Lady Tsunade and all the Grandmasters with respect, boy. Naruto stiffened and looked at Tsunade, who gave him a stern look. My apologies, Grandmaster Inoki. You too, Grandmaster Tsunade. Inoki crossed his arms and looked away as Gaara spoke. Naruto, this mission might be the most difficult you'll ever have. It requires you to perform every aspect of the creed perfectly. One mistake could lead to certain death. Naruto nodded. Both my mother and father served the Brotherhood to the fullest extent, and I plan to do the same and better. I laughed. I love the trusty boy, but you have a lot to live up to, too. Your father was a great assassin. The Yellow Flash, they called him that because that's the last thing you saw before you died. You humiliate me and my father's legacy with your words, Grandmaster A. May I know the details of this mission so I can prepare accordingly? I looked at Mei, who threw a scroll to Naruto. Apparently, the heir to the Targaryen legacy, Viserys, sold his sister to Khal Drogo of the Dothraki in exchange for 40,000 Dothraki soldiers. 40,000. That would be a real problem if the Dothraki actually crossed the Narrow Sea. Mei nodded. That's why we sent you. To observe and report. You'll leave for Karth tomorrow. Then you'll cross the Red Desert to infiltrate the Dothraki Sea and begin your work. Whoa, with all due respect, Grandmasters, but the Red Waste is arguably the most brutal terrain on the planet. Even the Dothraki fear crossing it so much that they refuse to attack Karth for fear of the waste. Inoki nodded. Yes, and you've completed your intense training in weather conditions. You're not afraid, are you? No, I'm not. It just wouldn't be a smart move. Naruto pointed at the map on the new table in front of the Grandmasters and Tsunade nodded. Instead of sailing to the other side of the continent, I'm going to Pentos. It's the same free city that currently houses the Targaryens, and it will be easier for me to infiltrate from there, and then risk everything in Redmoor. All the Grandmasters studied the map and agreed. Naruto, the Grandmasters, we now entrust you with the mission of infiltrating Khal Drogo's Khalasar and deciding whether the Targaryens should be allowed to live. Do you accept this mission, Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto nodded and Mei smiled. Nice try to do it again in one piece, handsome. Naruto laughed and bowed before leaving the room. He left the Grandmaster's temple and ran straight home. When he arrived home, he found a young woman leaving. Are you leaving already, Terra? The young woman bowed her head towards the murderer. Yes, my lord, if that is all right with you. Terra was born on the island of Noth in the Summer Sea, off the coast of the continent of Sithorios. She was enslaved at a young age and taken to Slaver's Bay in Essos, where she was training to work as an interpreter for her slave master before Minato Namikaze, Naruto's father, killed her master and brought her back to the hidden city. Despite being free, Terra pledged to serve Minato, and since she would not leave, Minato paid her a wage and gave her a house. That's fine by me. I'm leaving for a mission tomorrow. I don't know how long I'll be gone. Terra smiled. I'd be happy to look after her in your absence. Naruto smiled, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a bag full of gold. He placed the bag in the girl's hands, not noticing her blush. I really appreciate everything you've done for my family. Any changes? Tara shook her solemnly, and Naruto nodded. Thanks, Tara. I mean it. Tara blushed even more and looked at her hands. I made you a pot of ramen. I thought you'd be hungry after training. Naruto surprised Tara with a hug. I don't know what I would do without you. Tara smiled and hugged him back. When the two parted, Naruto said his goodbyes and went into his house. The young assassin took off his coat and placed it on a chair. He then removed his sword from his hip and removed the bracelets from his wrist. Naruto took a deep breath and sighed before walking through his house and stopped at a door. The room was simple. A nightstand, a chair, a desk, and a bed. On this bed sat a woman with waist-length red hair. Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's mother. Kushina suffered an accident on the day Naruto was born, an accident that no one wanted to give details about, and had been in a coma ever since. Many told him he should give up on her and let her die, but Naruto, Tara, and Grandmaster Tsunade personally saw to it that she stayed alive and somehow, well. Kushina was a strong warrior and master assassin. She didn't deserve to die in a bed. Naruto sat down next to his mother's bed and stared at her. He'd stared at her his whole life. He was one of the deadliest men on the planet, but he could do nothing but stare at his comatose mother. I received another mission today. Chosen by Lord Jiraiya. I'm leaving tomorrow. I don't know when I'll be back. Mom, I don't know when I'll see you again. I need you to wake up, please. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at her mother's motionless face. Tara will take care of you. Lady Tsunade has been asking healers across the kingdom for help. One day you will wake up. I swear on my name and honor as a member of the sisterhood. Naruto stood up and wiped his face. I have to rest after a long trip tomorrow. I'll come see you tomorrow before I leave. The young Uzumaki left the room, and once he closed the door, he immediately slid to the floor and cried. The next morning, Naruto Uzumaki tied a bag of throwing stars to his thigh and slipped a dagger into his boot. He looked at himself in the mirror before taking his sword and unsheathing the blade. The blade was made of Valerian steel and had a simple leather hilt, while the guard was shaped like a fox's head with its teeth bared and 2 rubies for eyes. The sword belonged to his mother, and Naruto used it to slay his enemies in her absence. He inspected the blade for flaws before replacing it in its sheath and on his hip. Then he turned his attention to a box, which he opened and took out 3 daggers. These weren't ordinary daggers. They were 3-pronged daggers his father had made before disappearing on a mission north of the wall. Naruto placed one on each hip and the last on the back of his belt. The Uzumaki then grabbed his coat and put it on, tying his sash around his waist. He completed his outfit with his armbands, which contained hidden blades. He left his room and went to his mother's room, where he found Tara sitting next to her mother's bed. The young killer simply walked up to his mother and kissed her on the forehead. I'll be back as soon as I can. He turned and nodded to Tara before pulling up his hood. Send an eagle if he wakes up. You know I will. Naruto smiled and left, not noticing that one of Kushina's fingers was starting to tremble. Chapter 3. It had been almost a month since the young assassin departed for the Pentos. He spent most of his journey in the cabin of his ship studying maps and reading everything he could about the Dothraki. Once his ship docked, Naruto pulled up his hood and headed to the city rooftops. Now that he was in the city, he needed a way to get close to the Targaryens, preferably before they were with the Dothraki. Naruto walked along the edge of a bell tower and smiled as he saw a man rob a helpless old man in an alley. Naruto followed the man who stood high above and watched as he bought bread for his family, his wife and 2 daughters. The young assassin felt sympathy for the man but had a mission to accomplish. A few hours later, the man was walking down the street looking for his next target, but he couldn't help feeling like someone was watching him. He turned around and saw a normal street, ignoring the hooded figure sitting on the bench. He continued on his way and began pointing out targets, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He turned around only to see a normal crowded market, ignoring the hooded man standing in the middle. The man saw a boy with an oyster cart leaving the market. Naruto watched as the man pulled out a knife and began walking toward the boy. Naruto's pace quickened, but he kept his feet light. He watched as the man got closer and closer to the boy, but his face remained motionless, devoid of any emotion. Just as the man was about to reach the boy, He was pushed into an alley and against a wall with the tip of a leaf against his throat as he stared into Naruto Uzumaki's blue eyes. You were going to kill that boy if I hadn't stopped you, weren't you? The man began to tremble in fear as Naruto pressed his three-pronged sword harder against his throat. It wasn't you! The man nodded as tears began to fall from his eyes. I've killed people for a lot less, but today's your lucky day. Naruto removed the blade from the man's neck and placed it on his hip. Aren't you going to kill me? Naruto laughed. Oh no, you're going to die sometime today, but how this conversation goes will determine how long you live. What do you mean? Naruto smiled. How good are you with that sword? Later that night, Daenerys Targaryen stood on her balcony looking at the moon. Tomorrow she was ready to meet the man her brother had sold her to like a piece of meat. Viserys had always been cruel to her, but she never thought he would go this far. She heard stories about the Dothraki, and all she could think of was what they would do to her. She always hoped to meet a man she would love, but her brother pulled the strings in her life and all she could do was obey. Daenerys was brought out of her thoughts when she heard a noise in her room. She turned around and walked slowly over. Who's there? She tentatively walked forward, her fear increasing with each step. Then she felt someone grab her from behind and place a knife to her throat. Shout for me! Daenerys let out the loudest scream she could muster, and the guards rushed into her bedchamber along with Viserys and Magister Illyrio Mopatis. The guards drew their swords and Viserys spoke. Let her go or I'll have you slaughtered like cattle, and not just you or your family. And if you don't have a family, then whoever you come into contact with. The man remained silent, and the guards started to advance, but stopped when they saw a hooded figure enter the room from the balcony. He placed his hand on the man's neck, and everyone heard the sound of a sword entering his neck. The man immediately released Daenerys, who fell to the ground, and Naruto pulled the man closer. Rest in peace. He then thrust his hidden blade deeper into the man's neck before letting his lifeless body fall to the ground. The assassin looked up and saw that the guards still had their weapons drawn. Please, there's no more need for violence. They ignored his words and moved forward. Naruto simply sighed, drew his sword, and slashed, all in one motion, his Valyrian steel blade slicing through the man's chainmail armor like butter, spilling his guts onto the marble floor. Everyone watched in shock as the guard tried to put his guts back into his body. Only Viserys managed to form words. Who are you? Naruto ignored the self-proclaimed king and looked at his sister on the ground and held out his hand. Daenerys stared at Naruto as her eyes drifted to the sword in his hand and noticed the blood dripping from where the blade was hidden in his wrist. But this man had just saved her, so she made the decision to take his hand. The Uzumaki smiled as he helped her up. He'd read almost every book about the Targaryens, and something in the back of his mind told him this girl was special, definitely beautiful. Are you okay, my lady? Daenerys blushed and managed to nod. Up close, she could see under his hood, and her eyes met his blue ones. She could feel him studying her. Naruto looked at the woman in front of him. She slumped slightly. He could tell she didn't want to marry someone she didn't know. She just wanted to go home. But she couldn't because she was taken home, and now she had to wander with her heartless brother. Even then, she still loved her brother. He was probably the only person who cared about her even a little bit. Her violet eyes held contact with his blue ones as her mind pondered what would become of her after all of this. I asked you a question? And I won't ask again. Naruto sighed inwardly, and only Daenerys noticed his grip on his sword tighten and gulped. If this man wanted everyone in this room dead, he could make it happen, but his next action surprised her. The young assassin turned to Viserys and knelt. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I have come to serve the one true king, Viserys Targaryen. King of the Undels and the First Men. Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Viserys looked at Naruto in shock. Actually? Naruto almost groaned, but just rolled his eyes before raising his head. Yes, your grace, indeed. And I believe tonight proves that I am capable of killing your enemies. Viserys nodded. Well, rise, Sir Uzumaki. I would be glad to have you as the first member of my royal guard. Naruto nodded and stood up. Infiltration complete. Day after, Naruto stood on the steps of Magister Illyrio's house awaiting Khal Drogo's arrival. He was alone while everyone else was out making preparations. Naruto realized they didn't understand the Dothraki ways and hoped none of them would offend them. Although he would end their mission early, he doubted even his father, at his fastest, could kill so many Dothraki. Being Uzumaki, Naruto laughed as he turned to Daenerys. Please call me Naruto, I'm not Knight. Daenerys nodded. Well, Naruto. I wanted to thank you for last night. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead, Naruto smiled. Of course, my lady, I couldn't allow that man to harm a hair on that pretty little head of yours. Daenerys blushed and was about to say something, but Viserys' arrival stopped her. Naruto! Why aren't you by my side? Naruto sighed before putting on his facade again. Excuse me, Your Excellency. I'm new to this royal guard job, Viserys sneered. Someone could have killed me by now. Naruto shook his head. While I may not have been with you, I promise you that no one you wouldn't allow would come within 10 feet of you. Your Grace. Viserys reluctantly nodded, and everyone prepared for the arrival of Khal Drogo, who surprised everyone when he left after taking a look at Daenerys. Where are you going? Did you like it? Viserys watched the retreating forms of the Dothraki, and Naruto laughed. Believe me, Your Excellency, if you didn't like it, we would know. And how do you know? Because I'd be cutting their heads off right now. Hidden City. Terra hummed as she walked around the Uzumaki house, dusting random things, trying to keep herself busy when she heard a loud crash. She immediately ran to Kushina's room, making sure to grab a dagger Naruto kept hidden throughout the house, and burst through the door. Once inside, he dropped his sword at what he saw. Kushina Uzumaki wakes up after 19 years and gasping for water. Chapter 4. What do you mean we can't tell him? Tsunade looked at her fellow grandmasters. Naruto has waited his whole life to meet his mother. I think he deserves to know she's awake, Mei sighed. I understand your frustration, my lady, but Naruto is in a dangerous place. Imagine how he would feel when he heard his mother was awake after so many years. He'd be anxious. Tsunade shook her head. Naruto is a professional. He wouldn't get anxious, Anoki snorted. Professional? Did you forget his last mission in Dorne? Tsunade was surprised when Gaara spoke. But what if he does? What if he's so focused on his mother that he slips and makes a mistake? Naruto is in hostile territory, surrounded by people who will kill him for the right reason. Naruto is like a brother to me, and I would hate to see something bad happen to him because he couldn't focus on the field. Tsunade sighed, knowing this was a battle she wouldn't win. Terra the girl, she swore to tell Naruto if there was any important update about her mother, and this is a really important update. Bring me the girl. I'll tell her why Naruto can't find out about her mother. Tsunade rubbed her temples and sighed before leaving the chamber. She walked to her office, sat at her desk, and looked at a letter Naruto had sent her. Naruto. I hope you know what you're doing, Pentos. Naruto took a deep breath as he swung his sword through the air, killing imaginary enemies. For the past few months, he cared for Viserys and studied him. The man was cruel, and his plans would take thousands of lives. But it wasn't his plans that made Naruto want to rip his head off. It was the way he treated his younger sister. Daenerys Targaryen was one of the most beautiful women he'd ever seen, but she had many insecurities. But Naruto saw something in her. He saw a raging fire waiting to burst forth. While caring for Viserys, he also grew close to Daenerys. On a few occasions, the two had conversations at night under the stars. He asked about the places he'd been and stories of his travels. Naruto was happy to share them, not to mentioning the Brotherhood. Daenerys seemed extremely interested in his stories and expressed that she would love to travel like him someday. Naruto launched himself at the throat of his non-existent opponent before spinning and piercing the heart of another. 3 figures stood to the side watching Naruto train with his sword. Viserys, Illyrio, and Daenerys watched in awe as Naruto masterfully wielded his sword with skill and speed. Are you sure this is wise, my lord? We know nothing about this man, Viserys sneered. What kind of question is that? Are you looking at the same thing I am? Of course he is, but are you sure he can be trusted? As the two discussed the young assassin, Daenerys watched Naruto train with a blush on her face. The reason she was blushing was because Naruto was wearing only a pair of pants, allowing her to see his well-sculpted upper body. Viserys noticed the way Daenerys was looking at Naruto and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His swordsmanship is impressive, but he doesn't have an army to give me, Khal Drogo does. You belong to him now, so don't let him catch you looking, because the pretty boy over there might not be so pretty anymore. Naruto saw this altercation out of the corner of his eye and saw Daenerys look down at the ground, but he continued his training and only stopped when he heard Viserys clap. Good work, Naruto, but how good are you against a moving target? Naruto held back a sneer. I'm insulted that you have to ask that question. I don't mean any disrespect. I've never seen you fight before, aside from the little fight the night you arrived, of course. Naruto sighed as he placed his sword back into its sheath. Fine. If you want to test me, go ahead. Illyrio signaled one of his guards to step forward and the man looked at the assassin. Without armor? Naruto shrugged. I won't need it. The guard then charged at Naruto and stabbed him, but Naruto simply turned around and swung his sword forward, causing the man to nearly lose his balance. The guard became enraged as he turned to face Naruto, gripped his sword tighter, and turned on Naruto. He swung back and forth, trying to strike Naruto, but Naruto either dodged or used his sheathed sword to block it. Naruto then blocked a sword strike and tripped over the man as he fell face first. The man turned around and came face to face with the tip of Naruto's sword. While Naruto was busy, Viserys gestured for more guards to attack him. The trained assassin only realized this when he heard the familiar sound of weapons being drawn. 3 new guards stepped forward as the one on the ground stood up. They surrounded Naruto as he gripped the hilt of his sword in one hand and its sheath in the other. Give me your best chance. Naruto smirked as the first guard attacked him with a downward slash. Naruto blocked it, and then pushed him back. The man threw his sword at Naruto, who deflected it, and then spun around and hit him with the flat of his sword. Naruto heard quick footsteps and managed to dodge a spear. The man charged at him again, but this time Naruto blocked it, and struck him in the face with his sheath before kicking him in the chest. Another guard came at him with a wide swing, but Naruto ducked and elbowed him in the back, pushing him forward. What's up? 4 against 1. Do you need more men? The guard turned on Naruto. Slashing, and stabbing, but Naruto kept blocking and parrying, never once letting an attack get in. The man was starting to get frustrated as Naruto kept blocking and the fight was taking too long. Naruto then blocked a downward slash and the 2 swords locked. Naruto then headed his opponent, and the guard was forced back by the action and groaned in pain. Naruto then kicked him in the face, knocking him to the ground. Naruto turned to see his 3 spectators completely shocked. Naruto looked at Daenerys, who had a small smile on her face before fear crossed her face, and Naruto remembered something. He had 4 opponents, and only 3 were on the ground. The assassin had just enough time to duck under a high slash that would have severed his head. Naruto quickly dropped his sheath and instead of standing up straight, he rolled backward to give himself some distance before leaping back to his feet. The guard saw this and went to close the distance between them. He brought his sword up and down with all his might, and Naruto could only block it with the flat of his sword. The man roared and used his strength to push Naruto back, who rolled onto his back again, but instead of getting up he lunged forward and rolled out of the way of another attack. Naruto looked at the man, who prepared to attack again, and grabbed his sword with both hands and swung with all his might. The 2 swords collided and everyone watched in amazement as Naruto's sword went to the right and launched the other, splitting it in 2. The guard fell back and saw Naruto's eyes darken as he raised his sword and slashed down. Everyone watched in shock as Naruto breathed heavily and raised his sword again, and the guard looked at the hole in the ground just inches from his face. We don't kill innocent people, Naruto whispered to himself, one of the main rules of the Brotherhood, as he picked up his sheath and placed his sword inside. I think you've seen enough, my lord. Viserys nodded and Naruto began to walk away. Naruto. The Uzumaki turned around and looked at Viserys. Prepare for tomorrow. My sister will marry Khal Drogo, and those savages won't surprise me. Naruto nodded. Of course. The assassin then turned and took his leave, as Viserys couldn't believe how lucky he was to have Naruto on his side. A few hours later, dusk fell over Pentos and Naruto, in his assassin robes. He walked through Ilyrio's estate, sticking to the shadows and dodging guards until he reached his destination, Ilyrio's office. Naruto slid to the top and quickly went to the desk. He began rummaging through the letters and papers at random. He pulled out all the drawers until he reached the last one that was closed. Naruto looked toward the door before taking a small tool set out of his pocket. He quickly got to work on the lock while keeping a close eye on the door. It took about 15 seconds, but he managed to pick the lock and open the drawer. The first thing he saw made his eyes widen. A book bearing the Templar insignia. He also found several notes, mentioning the Targaryen children, and the recapture of the Iron Throne. Naruto would have continued reading, but the sound of the doorknob stopped him. Magister Illyrio opened the door to his office and found it completely empty, exactly as he left it. The old man quickly went to his desk and opened his drawer while Naruto watched from the shadows behind a curtain. He turned his head and saw a caged crow in the opposite corner. He put his finger to his lip, hoping the bird would understand. Illyrio pulled out a book and began flipping through the pages before his eyes widened as he reached the page he wanted. He quickly took his ink pen and began scribbling on a piece of paper. From the corner, Naruto's eyes glowed a slightly brighter blue and he could make out the words on the paper. Illyrio finally finished his letter and looked up only to be pushed against the bookshelf behind his desk with a hand wrapped tightly around his neck. How did you find out? Illyrio looked into Naruto's blue eyes as he struggled to breathe. I said, how did you find out? Naruto increased the pressure on the man's neck before releasing his grip enough to allow Illyrio to speak. Your clothing and choice of weapons aroused my suspicions, but people have tried to imitate the Brotherhood for years. It was me, Naruto interrupted him by squeezing his neck again. Too high. Illyrio nodded quickly and pointed to the book on his desk. Naruto looked at it and saw a picture of his sword, the foxtail. Next to it was a drawing of his mother, Kushina Uzumaki the Red Death. A bingo book. Who was this letter addressed to? I won't tell you! Naruto squeezed again, this time harder. Who? Illyrio shook his head and Naruto sighed. Then I guess you'll have to take it to the grave. Naruto used both hands and began to strangle Magister Illyrio. The man placed his hands on Naruto's wrist in hopes of fighting back. But Naruto had the upper hand and before long the man went limp and Naruto threw him to the ground, dead. Naruto looked at the dead man and said a small prayer before taking a piece of paper and translating Illyrio's message into a language only members of the Brotherhood understood. There's a member of the Brotherhood in Pentos. He's disguised himself as a man loyal to Viserys, but I know otherwise. He wields Kushina Uzumaki's sword. Below that, Naruto wrote, Magister Illyrio discovered me. I looked after him. I need to know who this letter was addressed to. You, of all people, should know or be able to find out. Naruto rolled up the paper and walked to the office window. He opened it and whistled. It wasn't long before an eagle flew down and landed on the windowsill. After confirming the message to the bird, Naruto told it its destination and took off. When he finished, Naruto looked at Illyrio's body and began to formulate a plan. An hour later, Naruto left Illyrio's room and started walking through the hallways toward his own room. He caught up with him, but saw a figure standing outside. Daenerys, what are you doing here? Daenerys turned around surprised that Naruto wasn't in her room. I couldn't sleep. What are you doing? His response wasn't answered as he stood outside her door, but he shrugged. I couldn't sleep either. How about we go for a walk? Naruto extended his elbow to the girl and she blushed bright red as she wrapped her arm around his. Not long after, the duo sat on the beach and Daenerys couldn't stop laughing as Naruto told her about the pranks he played in his youth. I can't believe you did that, Naruto shrugged. Served him right. But you taught yourself how to make soap just for a joke, Naruto smiled. There's nothing I wouldn't do for a joke, Daenerys sighed before looking back at the arena. You seem to have a dream childhood. I wish I had one like that. Naruto thought back to his childhood. He had many friends in the hidden city, but his life wasn't perfect. He didn't know if his father was still alive, and he didn't know if his mother would ever open her eyes again. Me too. You shouldn't have to go through this. The two stood in silence as they watched the waves, and the Targaryen's eyes drifted to Naruto's sword resting in the sand. Where did you get the sword? It's Valyrian steel, right? Naruto nodded as he looked into the leaf's two ruby eyes. Yes, it is. And it's actually my mother's sword. Is your mother a fighter? Naruto laughed. Yeah, it is. And a pretty good one from what I hear. Did she teach you how to fight? Unfortunately not. I had many instructors, but my mother was never one of them. An idea popped into his head as he stood up and unsheathed his sword. Get up, my lady. Daenerys looked up in confusion. Excuse me? Naruto smiled. You heard me. I'm going to teach you how to use a sword. Daenerys shook her head. I'm not sure if I should do it. Nonsense. Where I'm from, a woman kicks some serious ass. You always say you wish you could do this and that. Well, now's your chance. You can sit there and let your brother control you for the rest of your life. Or you can stand up and show me you've got a backbone. Naruto's words sank in and Daenerys stood up. Good, now grab it. This isn't the best or safest sword to practice with, but it will have to do for now. Daenerys took Naruto's sword and without realizing what she was doing, Naruto stood behind her and began showing her the proper stance. Daenerys was surprised when Naruto spread her legs. Widen your stance. Square your shoulders. No, don't rest on your heels and balance on the balls of your feet. Daenerys followed Naruto's instructions and was soon in a position he approved of. It's okay, it could definitely use some work, but it'll do for now. The Targaryen woman was blushing before, but now her face was bright red as Naruto pressed his body against hers and began guiding her through basic cuts and thrusts. The first thing you must learn is that your weapon is an extension of yourself. You must think of it as another part of your own body. Like a second head? Naruto laughed and shook his head. No, more like an extra long, really sharp arm. Naruto continued to guide her arms through the movements. The sword is a simple tool, but in the hands of a master it becomes the most versatile of weapons, and just as the imagination is limitless, so are the possibilities of the sword. Daenerys was so focused on his words that she didn't notice Naruto let go of her arms and continued the movements on his own until Naruto laughed, and she looked at his hands. He quickly dropped the sword and Naruto laughed even harder. We'll work on that. Daenerys looked at his smiling face and couldn't stand it anymore. Before Naruto could react, Daenerys threw herself at him and crashed her lips against his. Naruto was shocked, and Daenerys used that as an opportunity to slide her tongue into his mouth. Naruto was surprised but couldn't pull away. Her lips felt so soft, and soon he was kissing her. Naruto came to his senses when Daenerys tried to remove his coat. Wait, we can't do this. Daenerys didn't care as Naruto managed to slip a few words between kisses. It took all his strength, but Naruto managed to pull away. Daenerys, we can't. You're supposed to marry Khal Drogo in a week. Do you think a knight cares whether his new wife is a virgin or not? Viserys is selling me for an army that might not even cross the sea. I don't want my first time to be with a man I don't even know. I love you. You're kind, compassionate, strong, and funny. No one has ever made me smile like you have. I know I've only known you a short time, but please let me have this. Naruto looked into her eyes and saw all the emotions that were running through her and nodded before placing his lips on hers. Daenerys removed Naruto's coat, and his shirt soon followed. Daenerys couldn't contain her blush as she looked at Naruto's bare torso. She had seen it a couple of times when he was training, but now she was up close. She could see every scar on his chest. Naruto took her chin and gently lifted it to look into her eyes before kissing her softly on the lips. The duo soon hit the sand and had Hex on the beach under the moon and stars. Chapter 5 Black Castle. Jon Snow was in a difficult situation. While training to become a member of the Night's Watch, he discovered he was the only recruit who had received formal training beforehand, and his high level of skill didn't sit well with the other recruits. After a long day of training, they cornered him, pressed a leaf against his throat, and threatened to throw him off the wall until the door opened. All eyes turned to a hooded man who stood about 6'4". Like all the men of the Night's Watch, he was dressed all in black, and his blonde hair could be seen beneath his hood. What do you want? This is none of your business. The man looked at Gran and chuckled. This is what passes for recruits these days. Jealous little girls throwing tantrums. Rast looked at the man. Who do you think you are? I think I'm the man who should throw them over the wall. If they attack so quickly, I can only imagine what would happen if we actually admitted them to the guard. Gren went to point the knife at him, but before he could move, the man had a sword against his neck. Even Jon's eyes widened at the speed because no one even saw him reach for his sword. Now, why don't you stop fighting amongst yourselves like idiots, and really prove that you have what it takes to join this brotherhood? And the next time I see something like this, I'll escort you to the wildlings myself. And with the man he turned and left. Who was that? May my dear friends. They all turned and saw Tyrion Lannister standing where the hooded man was. It was Minato Namikaze, also known as the Yellow Flash, Pentos. Naruto stood still in full assassin gear alongside Viserys, and watched as people presented Drogo and Daenerys' wedding gifts. The young assassin's eyes scanned the crowd for threats, but always landed on Daenerys. Occasionally, the two would lock eyes, and the Targaryen woman would offer him a smile whenever she could. Unbeknownst to them, one of Drogo's blood riders noticed this exchange. Daenerys looked away from Naruto as a man dressed in Westerosi garb appeared. Khal Drogo greeted him in Dothraki, and the man greeted him in the same language before turning back to Daenerys and switching to the common tongue. A small gift for the new Khaleesi. Songs and stories from the Seven Kingdoms. Daenerys took the books from the man. Thank you, sir. Are you from my country? The man smiled. Yes, my name is Dash, Ser Yora Mormont of Bear Island. Yora looked at Naruto in surprise. And how do you know who I am? Naruto smiled under his hood. You are quite famous throughout the Seven Kingdoms, Ser Yora. Selling men into slavery will bring your name to light. Daenerys looked at Yora in shock. Yes, you're right. I sold people into slavery and was kicked out of my family and had to flee my country. I'll say I'm paying for my crimes. Naruto smiled. Fair enough. Yora turned to Daenerys, but not before casting a suspicious glance at the hooded blonde. I served your father for many years. God willing, I hope to always serve the rightful king. Daenerys nodded and Yora stepped down before a servant placed a chest containing 3 beautiful egg-shaped stones. Dragon eggs, Khaleesi. From the Shadowlands beyond Ass-High. Ages have turned them to stone, but they will always be beautiful. A gift from Illyrio. Daenerys looked at the eggs and marveled at them. Thank you. Last but not least, Naruto approached the newlywed couple and took out a book. This is the tale of the absolutely brave shinobi written by my godfather Lord Jiraiya. Daenerys nodded and smiled at Naruto, who returned the message and nodded to Khal Drogo before turning to leave. Stop! The young assassin turned around and saw one of Khal Drogo's blood riders pointing his arak at him. The blood rider looked at Khal Drogo and spoke in Dothraki. This man stares at your new wife when he thinks no one is looking. He wants to buck her. Khal Drogo calmly turned his eyes towards Naruto as Yora began to translate. He said I know what he said. Naruto surprised everyone when he turned to the blood rider and trusted the Dothraki. Why would you assume I'd want to buck her? She's a kidnapped woman. The blood rider's glare intensified as he took a few steps towards Naruto. So you're calling me a liar? Naruto shook his head. I said no, Sudash. The man swung his arak at Naruto, intending to cut off his head before he could finish speaking. Daenerys held her breath and Khal Drogo leaned forward, much more interested in this fight than in the past. Naruto ducked under another attempt to cut off his head, and then pulled his midsection back as the man attempted to gut him. Naruto backpedaled as he ducked under the slashes. Soon his back collided with a wall of flesh as the other members of Drogo's Khalasar shoved him forward and forced him to duck under another slash. Naruto growled and glared at the man. Stop now, before I really hurt you. The blood rider ignored his words and charged forward. He angrily began trying to slash and cut the young assassin, but Naruto was too fast and evaded all the attacks. Defend yourself! He came down with another slash, but this time, instead of dodging, Naruto grabbed his wrist. Good! Naruto twisted his body as he now stood with his back to the man while still holding his wrist and was able to look at Khal Drogo's face, who had an amused smile. Naruto squeezed the man's already twisted arm and forced him to drop his weapon. Naruto quickly grabbed the curved blade and turned around while swinging it. The entire Drogo Khalasar became quiet when the blood rider's head hit the ground. Drogo rose from his seat as Naruto pulled a dagger from his hip pouch and picked up the severed head, cutting off the braid before dropping it. Several Dothraki warriors drew their weapons, but Naruto grabbed his sword before Drogo raised his hand and everyone stood still. You have killed the blood of my blood, Naruto nodded. Yes, and I apologize to the great Khal. I wish I could have prevented it. But he died in combat, so there's no greater glory. Khal Drogo nodded and ordered his men to retreat. You're telling the truth. What's your name? Naruto smiled. Naruto Uzumaki. A few hours later, after the wedding, Naruto was allowed to sleep in the hut that had previously belonged to the blood rider Naruto killed, Kohallo, by Khal Drogo. Drogo said he would reap the rewards of killing Kohallo in combat. The blonde-haired man lay in his bed with only a single candle burning in the room. His trained senses picked up the sound of quick footsteps, and his eyes widened just in time to see several Dothraki warriors storming the cabin with their weapons drawn. Years of training had taught him to always be prepared, especially in hostile areas like a Dothraki Khalasar. As soon as the first man was a few feet away, Naruto leaped up and jumped off the bed into the air before landing on top of him with his hidden sword in his chest. Naruto then grabbed the next man's wrist and slashed him across the stomach before flipping him over his shoulder. He then slashed out with his left hand, extending that blade, and caught another man in the throat before doing the same with his right hand. One man tried to sneak up on him, but Naruto grabbed his sword hand and slashed his throat with his hidden blade before using the sword as a spear to take out another. He quickly turned around and delivered a high kick to another man's chin that had so much force that it snapped his head back and broke his neck. Naruto took a deep breath as he looked at the bodies on the ground, but he didn't relax when he heard more people running towards the store. Buck me! As soon as the first man entered, Naruto threw him aside and headbutted the next man behind him, and fell when Naruto broke his nose. He then turned around when the man he threw aside attacked him with a club. The master assassin in training took his hand and sent a palm strike against his chest. A palm strike that was aided by his hidden blade. Ah! Naruto let out a scream as he repeatedly slapped the man's chest, hitting his heart and both lungs. The blonde warrior dropped the lifeless body to the side as a large man entered the tent. He had an axe in his hand and a sword at his hip. As soon as he entered the hut, he swung his axe at Naruto, who barely moved out of the way. He drew his sword and charged at the young assassin, who yanked his arm back and extended his hidden blade once more and attempted to slash at the brute, but was knocked back with his shoulder against the wall of the hut. The man tried to slash Naruto with his sword, but Naruto ducked and attempted to attack with his hidden blade, but the Dothraki warrior simply leaned to the side before throwing a punch at Naruto. Naruto blocked the punch with his forearm before attempting to use his other sword to slash the man in the stomach, but he pulled back just in time. Naruto threw a punch at the man's head, but he simply ducked and punched Naruto hard in the ribs before he could raise his guard and then received a hard blow to the face before receiving a kick to the chest. Naruto groaned as his back hit the ground. His vision was blurry and he could taste blood on his lips. He breathed raggedly as the Dothraki warrior slowly approached him. "That's all you got, stranger? I'm disappointed." He smirked as he raised his sword and was about to impale him, but Naruto's left hand shot out and an arrowhead flew out of the bracelet and embedded itself into the man's stomach. The brute groaned as blood began to flow from his mouth as Naruto stood up and severed both of his legs, causing the man to fall to his knees before Naruto. The young assassin looked the Dothraki brute in the eyes before plunging both blades into the man's neck. "Rest in peace." Naruto retracted his swords and the man's body fell to the ground. The young assassin held his ribs and looked toward the entrance of the cabin, hoping more men would arrive. But when they didn't, he slowly stood up and grabbed his sword, which had been in the corner throughout the fight. He hobbled slowly to the entrance of the cabin, ready to face whatever was on the other side. Outside, while Naruto was inside fighting for his life, Khal Drogo's entire Khalasar gathered outside to watch the outcome. Khal Drogo himself sat on his horse with his 2 blood riders on either side, each of them staring at the hut. Off to the side, Daenerys stood at the entrance to her shared hut with Drogo, covered only in an animal skin. She tried to hide her tears, but they fell anyway. Tears for Naruto and tears for being taken by Drogo. Viserys stood next to Yora and shook his head. "It's a shame, he was a good fighter. He would have killed hundreds in my name. I wouldn't dismiss him so quickly. He killed one of Drogo's blood riders, I might add, with ease." Viserys shook his head at Yora's words. "Khal Drogo sent 10 men to that hut with orders to remove Naruto's head. While he was asleep, I might add." Viserys said his last words in a mocking tone and the former Lord of Bear Island nodded. "How did you come across a warrior as skilled as Naruto Uzumaki? He saved Dani's life from an assassin. He stepped out of the shadows and plunged a sword into her neck before swearing loyalty to me. Though it seems that might mean nothing now." Yora heard many murmurs and smiled as he looked at the hut. Viserys craned his neck to look and was surprised when he saw Naruto's figure emerge from the hut. He was wearing only a pair of trousers, and his body was covered in so much blood that it was hard to tell if it was his own. He clutched his left side with one hand and held his sword tightly with the other, but Yora noticed blood oozing from his bracers. Naruto limped toward Khal Drogo, who looked at him smiling. The young assassin glanced at Daenerys, who seemed relieved to see him alive, before turning his attention back to the call. "What is the meaning of this?" Everyone fell silent as all eyes turned to Drogo, who looked at his blood riders before turning back to Naruto. "Naruto Uzumaki, you killed one of my blood riders. The blood of my blood." Naruto tensed and gripped his sword tighter. "A call must always have 3 blood riders and you showed a skill that cannot be wasted, but you had to be tested. Kohallo saved my life 10 times, so I sent you 10 opponents to prove your worth. You can ride beside me as blood of my blood." One of Drogo's blood riders handed Drogo a knife and slashed his palm before throwing the blade to Naruto, who stared at the blade as he weighed his options. "Bucket!" Naruto cut his hand and shook Khal Drogo's hand. One of the blood riders gestured forward, and a dark black horse was guided toward him. Naruto approached the steed and climbed atop it, and Drogo turned to the rest of his Khalasar. "Welcome Naruto Uzumaki. Blood of my blood!" The entire Khalasar cheered and Naruto could only think of one thing. What the hell did he get himself into? Chapter 6. It had been 2 months since Daenerys married Khal Drogo, and 2 months since Naruto became her 3rd blood rider. He'd spent the last 2 months simply riding, much to Viserys' disapproval. In his eyes, he'd given Drogo his dues on Daenerys, and the Khal had yet to pay him. While he may have been telling the truth, Naruto hoped Drogo never would. Naruto himself had an interesting 2 months. His first few days as one of Drogo's blood riders were filled with constant fighting as some members of the Khalasar disapproved of an outsider sitting in the position alongside their Khal. The young assassin was attacked by Dothraki warriors for days before they finally understood why Drogo appointed him as a blood rider. Naruto Uzumaki was a nearly unstoppable killing machine. After solidifying his place, Drogo appointed one of Drogo's blood riders, the Khal appointed Eri, one of Daenerys' handmaidens, to teach her about Dothraki culture and the responsibilities that come with being a blood rider for the Great Khal. While Naruto spent most of his time in lessons with Eri or training with Yora, he managed to sneak in sword lessons with Daenerys 3 times a week. No one understood why Naruto trained with the new Khaleesi, but Naruto claimed that a strong Khaleesi would make Drogo's Khalasar more feared than it already was, and the Horse Lord allowed the lessons to continue. The only person who didn't approve of the lessons was Viserys. At one point, he demanded that Naruto stop the lessons, but Naruto refused, claiming he had no valid reason to stop. The young assassin currently rode at the head of the Khalasar with Drogo and the other blood riders while Eri walked beside him. The only Dothraki city is Vies Dothrak. It is ruled by the Dash Khaleen, wise women who were once the wives of now dead Khals. If Khal Drogo is to fall, it is the responsibility of the blood riders to escort his Khaleesi to Vies Dothrak to join the Dash Khaleen before they themselves join their Khal in the afterlife. Naruto groaned internally. He had no intention of handing Daenerys over to these Dash Khaleen, and he definitely wouldn't take his own life when Drogo died, mainly because he planned to be the orchestrator behind the Horse Lord's death. The only reason he agreed to be a blood rider was to gain the Khal's trust to further his infiltration and be close enough to Daenerys to better protect her. Besides, he wasn't sure he would have survived if he had turned down the offer. Thank you, Eri. Your lessons are always enlightening. I will serve the Khal to the best of my ability. Eri blushed at Naruto's praise and looked at the ground as the unconscious assassin continued riding. Only Drogo noticed and simply smiled. Not far behind them, Daenerys watched the two interact. Over the past 2 months, Daenerys had grown closer to the young Uzumaki, as they would steal small kisses under the moonlight during training sessions, and Naruto continued to tell her stories of his travels across the 7 kingdoms. But ever since Eri began her lessons with Naruto, she began floating closer and closer to him, making his blood boil. Are you okay, Khaleesi? Yora brought Daenerys out of her thoughts. I'm fine, Sir Yora. You need to drink and eat. Yora handed him a piece of dried horse meat, and his stomach turned. Is there nothing else? Yora shook his head. The Dothraki have 2 things in abundance: grass and horses. People can't live off grass. Daenerys sighed and began nibbling at the piece of meat as she looked at Naruto, who must have told Eri a joke because her servant could barely contain her laughter. Yora followed her gaze, but only saw Khal Drogo riding in his line of vision. The old knight looked at the young Targaryen. It will be easier. Daenerys ignored the knight and began to move forward. A few hours later, the Khalasar set up camp, and Naruto removed most of his gear, leaving him in pants, boots, and a white shirt. He also kept Foxtail on his hip, just in case. He spent most of the day playing with the Khalasar children. They seemed to enjoy his acrobatic skills as he entertained them with handstands and flips. After a while, he decided to check on Daenerys, whom he had heard was not well when they made camp. The assassin entered Daenerys' tent and found her being attended to by her handmaidens. Khaleesi, may I speak? In private. The Targaryen girl simply nodded to her handmaidens and quickly left the tent, but not before Eri shot a glance at the young assassin. When the two were alone, Naruto gently took her hands and inspected them. I heard you were hurt when we got to camp. Why didn't you tell me? Daenerys looked down and remained silent, but Naruto lifted her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes. What happened? The younger girl looked up and saw tears threatening to spill from her eyes. You told me you would protect me. Naruto looked at her in confusion before inspecting her wounds again. This time, he was able to conclude that the cause of her injuries was from grabbing something extremely hard. It didn't take him long to figure out why, and he slowly brought the young princess's hands to his lips before kissing them softly. I did it. I promised I'd protect you, and I'm not the kind of person who breaks promises. But I'm not one to sugarcoat things either. What do you mean? Naruto brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Right now we're 2 foreigners surrounded by hordes of savages. If we run, they'll find us and kill me, and then it won't just be Drogo you'll have to worry about. You'll be raped by everyone. Daenerys looked horrified, but Naruto placed his lips on hers. The young Targaryen felt his tongue enter her mouth as she leaned into his body, enjoying the feeling of him pressed against her. When he pulled away, Daenerys saw a fire burning in his eyes. But as long as I live, I won't let that happen. I said I was going to protect you, and I'm going to do just that. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do to survive. His words hung over her as she processed what he said. Please, I don't want dash. Naruto interrupted her with another kiss. His words died in his throat as he melted into the kiss. When he pulled away, she didn't see the fire that was there before. This time she saw conflict. I know you don't want to do it. I don't want you to. But if you want to leave with your heads, you have to learn how to make Drogo happy. What are you talking about? Naruto took a deep breath before speaking. The art of seduction. Many don't like to use it, but it's an effective tool that can be used to whisper in Call's ears. All you have to do is learn to master it. Daenerys looked down at the ground and Naruto lifted his chin. You trust me? The girl just nodded, and Naruto wanted nothing more than to tell her that she didn't have to do this, but he knew it would be a lie. She had to do this. She may not have been a member of the Brotherhood, but he saw qualities in her that would make her a great assassin. If she decided to go down that path, she'd have to make difficult decisions. All he was doing was preparing her for that. I know this is going to be difficult. I've personally done things I didn't want to do during my travels, but sometimes the hardest decision is the best. Daenerys pondered the choice. Every part of her body told her not to, but all doubts disappeared when she looked into Naruto's eyes. No one had ever looked at her the way Naruto did. He truly cared for her, and she expected him to do whatever it took to protect her. I will do that. Naruto nodded and kissed the top of her head. Thank you, Daenerys. When we're out of this, I'll make it up to you. The assassin gave her one last kiss before leaving the tent. He started walking around the camp until he found his target. He grabbed the arm of an unsuspecting brunette and dragged her into his tent. Once inside, Naruto looked Doria in the eye while the girl had a lustful smile on her face. I knew you loved me. How can I serve you? Naruto smiled as Doria approached him, but before she could touch her, he grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him. Not for me, you're Khaleesi. King's Landing. A figure stepped off a boat and onto the docks of King's Landing. The figure's face was devoid of any baby fat, its spiky black hair framing one side of its face. The figure wore a long white robe with slits in the front and back to allow for easy movement. It also had long sleeves, an open collar, and a hood that reached a peak. Underneath the robe, it wore another black, high-collared shirt and black pants with boots. Over his robes, the figure wore a pair of steel bracers and a purple rope sash around his waist. Over that sash was a belt covered with supply pouches, sheaths for throwing knives, and a pair of scabbards. In one of the scabbards was a chakuto made of Valyrian steel, the hilt and scabbard a simple black. The other held a long knife. The belt buckle was shaped like the Brotherhood's symbol. Are you still not going to tell me why you needed me to bring you to this place, Sasuke? The man now known as Sasuke smiled as he looked down at the deck of the ship. Sorry, Edward, it's official business. Thanks for the ride. Where are you going now? Edward Kenway looked out at the open sea and smiled. I'm heading to Dorne to pick up someone for Lord Jiraiya before I go to Karth. I might anchor there until something comes up. Sasuke nodded as he watched Edward's crew prepare to set sail. Well, I appreciate your hospitality, Edward, and I wish you a safe trip. The master assassin smiled. You're always welcome at the Jackdaw, Sasuke. And remember, I'm just an eagle's throw away. Sasuke nodded and started walking down the docks as Edward watched him disappear into the crowd. Sasuke walked through the city and took in the sights. Hungry people, beggars on every corner, and a thief poised to steal not far from them. The dark-haired man mocked the city's sorry state as he continued his walk before reaching his destination, a bell tower. He entered the tower, but instead of going up, he went down and entered a chamber with a metal door. The chamber had 4 torches, but only 3 were lit. Sasuke pulled on the unlit torch and heard chains and gears begin to move as the door opened. Sasuke Uchiha, we've been waiting for you. Standing in the doorway was a tall, thin man with pale skin and long black hair. He wore black pants, a black shirt, and a gray robe over them. Like Sasuke, he wore a purple rope around his waist. The most notable thing about him were his golden eyes and the purple markings around them. Sasuke sighed as he walked through the door. Of course you have Lord Orochimaru, Great Sea of Grass. Naruto mounted his horse as the Khalasa walked through the tall grass. It had been a week since he had Doria begin teaching Daenerys how to use hex to manipulate Drogo. From the way Drogo seemed to float around the girl at times, he could tell they were working. Eri walked beside him, talking beside him, but he wasn't paying attention. His eyes flicked to Daenerys as she spoke to Yora. Something about the man unnerved him, but until he gave the assassin any reason to trust him, Naruto would allow him to keep breathing. The young assassin saw a slave being whipped for walking too slowly and turned to Eri. "Eri, do the Dothraki buy their slaves?" Eri shook her head. "No, they were gifts." "Gifts from whom?" "Cities either pay tribute or fight." "Easy decision." Naruto nodded, surprised that cities would hand over their own people. But then again, when a Dothraki horde rides into a city, it could almost never spell anything good. He was about to ask another question when Daenerys ordered the Khalasar to stop as she dismounted from her horse and began walking into the tall grass. He decided not to follow, hoping she wouldn't stray too far. The last few days had been difficult. She could use some space. He watched as some people began to whisper among themselves, wondering why they had been arrested. "Eri, do the Dothraki take orders from their Khaleesi the same way they would from their Khal?" "No. An order from a Khaleesi can be openly defied, but what a Khal says is valid." Naruto nodded as he looked down at the grass, his eyes glowing slightly as the world around him darkened and people's forms glowed white. This ability was something assassins in the Brotherhood trained for years to master: Eagle Vision. Eagle Vision worked with normal vision and hearing to enhance all senses. It helped the assassins track, mark, and kill their targets, as well as protect their allies. Naruto was currently using this ability to look straight through the tall grass where he saw Khaleesi, whose form was glowing with a golden color. His eyes widened when he saw Viserys on his horse charging through the tall grass heading towards Daenerys, and Naruto wasted no time as he quickly broke the reins of his horse and rode off with a rider following not far behind him, as well as Eri. Naruto arrived at a clearing and found Daenerys with Viserys, who had his hands around her neck and a sword pointed at her. Both Naruto and the rider acted extremely quickly as Naruto threw a throwing star at her hand, hitting the sword, while the rider wrapped his whip around her neck. Naruto watched with some satisfaction as Viserys wilted on the ground, struggling to breathe. The rider then turned to his Khaleesi and spoke in Dothraki, which Eri quickly translated. "The rider asks if you want him dead, Khaleesi?" "No." Naruto looked at Daenerys in surprise. "Are you sure, Khaleesi? I'll gladly finish him off for you." The Khaleesi quickly shook her head and the assassin sighed as he heard her voice crack and motioned for the rider to let his brother go. "She's not ready yet." The rider seemed to want to protest, but he couldn't refuse Naruto's order and let the man go. Viserys stood up coughing and looked at the rider as Yora approached. "Mormont! Uzumaki! Kill these Dothraki savages!" The rider looked nervously at Naruto, who ignored everyone else except Daenerys. "Come, Khaleesi, let you return to the Khalasar." He walked past the fuming Viserys as he escorted Daenerys. The beggar king tried to grab his horse, but the rider stopped him, telling him he would have to walk. After the altercation, they made camp, and Naruto made sure to keep a closer eye on Viserys while staying close to Daenerys. The assassin was currently in his tent, which he had built next to Daenerys's, with Yora and the rider who helped him save Daenerys. "For a man on horseback, the curved blade is a good thing, easier to handle." Yora held the rider's weapon as he explained the advantages of having such a weapon. "It's a fine weapon for a Dothrakan. But a man in full plate the Arak won't cut through steel. That's where the sword has the advantage. Designed to pierce plate." The rider shook his head. "Dothraki don't wear steel suits, armor." The two men looked at Naruto, who had remained silent for most of the conversation, while sharpening his sword with a whetstone. The Dothraki rider nodded and corrected himself. "Armor. Armor makes a man vraz?" The rider nodded in gratitude to Naruto and fixed his mistake. "Slow." The former lord of Bear Island nodded. "That's true, but it also keeps a man alive. My father taught me how to fight. He taught me that speed beats size, a great lesson to be taught." Attention turned to Naruto, who raised his sword for inspection. "While armor is designed to keep its wearer alive, it doesn't always do its job. A man in full armor will move almost twice as slowly, allowing his opponent to dance around him and find his weak spots. Do you know the most vulnerable parts of a Yora knight armor?" Yora fell silent, and Naruto answered his own question. "Joints. The neck. And depending on the type of helmet, if they're wearing one, the face. If a man knows these weak points, no matter what weapon he's holding, he can exploit those weak points. He has an advantage." Yora nodded and the rider spoke. "What about your battle dress? Why do you wear it?" Naruto laughed before answering. "My tunic offers a lot of freedom of movement, and also helps me deviate." Naruto saw the confused look on the riders' faces and laughed. It's the art of putting your opponent where you want them, allowing them to see what you want them to see. The writer nodded as some of his confusion cleared. Did your father teach you these things? Was he a great warrior like you? He didn't teach me, but I studied everything he knew. All his notes and advice were written in journals that I learned. He was an elite warrior, the writer smiled. My father was a blood rider like you. Blood rider of Kal Bardo. And you, Yora the Undul? Was your father a warrior too? Yora sighed and Naruto's eyes returned to his sword because he already knew the answer. He still is. A man of great honor. And I betrayed him. Naruto was about to say something, but Eri came in and interrupted his conversation. The Khaleesi wants to eat something different tonight. Kill some rabbits. The writer looked at Eri, annoyed that their conversation had stopped. There are no rabbits. Find some ducks. She likes ducks. The writer rolled his eyes and turned to her. Have you seen ducks, woman? Not rabbits, not ducks. Do you have eyes in your head? Right? Eri blushed and looked at Naruto, who seemed more interested in his sword than the conversation in front of him. Dog then. I've seen many dogs. The writer was about to reply, but the sound of Naruto's laughter made him stop. I think you should listen to Eri. I get tired of horse meat too. The writer shook his head. Khaleesi doesn't want to eat dog. The Khaleesi have a baby inside her. It's true. She doesn't bleed for 2 moons. Her belly begins to swell. Eri's words made the 3 men in the room look at her as if she had grown 3 heads, but the writer broke the silence. A blessing from the great stallion. Naruto quickly sheathed his sword and stood up. Tell the Khaleesi I'll personally bring her dinner. While I'm gone, she can prepare for her training session. He then quickly excused himself as Yora also gathered his things. I need to travel to Kohor. We ride through Vies Dothrak. Don't worry. I'll catch you. The horde is easy to find. A few hours later, Naruto sat in an empty clearing meditating. He always meditated when he was distressed. He was originally sent here to assess the danger Viserys presented to the 7 kingdoms, but everything changed quickly when he met Daenerys. She was the only reason his mission was dragging on for so long. It didn't look like Khal Drogo would be sailing to Westeros, so of course his mission was accomplished, but he couldn't let the girl suffer. Especially now that he knew she was pregnant. The baby could possibly be his, and if that was the case, he had to get her out of here. His meditation was interrupted when he heard footsteps behind him. You're late. Daenerys had a look of surprise on her face. This is the time when we normally meet for our lessons. Yes, but I went to get you some food. I was hoping to find you practicing a little early when I got here, but I guess I was getting ahead of myself. Daenerys looked down as Naruto stood up. We need to talk. About? You know what? Daenerys sighed as she pulled a training sword from the ground. The weapon was heavy in her hands, but after weeks of training, she was used to the weight. If you're trying to ask me who the father is, then all I can say is I hope it's you. But you don't know? How am I supposed to know? Naruto sighed. I suppose you're right. But this is an unforeseen situation that means we have to adapt the plan. Will I finally get to know about this plan? Believe me, the less you know, the better. No! Naruto looked at Daenerys in confusion. Excuse me? Daenerys gave Naruto a stern look that made him smile inwardly. I'm tired of having no say. Viserys made decisions for me, and now you're doing the same. I want to decide my own destiny. Naruto kept his face neutral as the Targaryen woman finished her rant. I gave you a decision before and you let me down. What was I supposed to do? Let you kill my brother? My only family left in this world. Yeah. His tone made Daenerys quite depressed as she looked into his eyes. Yes. If I had given him the same choice, he would have run the sword through your heart himself. This is a game, one of survival, and your brother will sacrifice you the first chance he gets. This is all one big game called survival. You do whatever it takes to survive, whether it's killing people you don't want to kill or pretending to be something you're not. I mean, look at me. I'm a blood rider to a horse lord. Never in my entire life did I even think about this, but guess what? It keeps me alive. He took a deep breath and continued. You're nothing but a pawn to him, and he thinks he's a king. He is a king. Naruto laughed. You know what they call your brother in Westeros? The Beggar King. It's not a fitting name, is it? Aegon the Conqueror took the throne long ago. And many years from now, he'll take it from the Baratheons. That's the way kingdoms work. Dynasties rise and fall. The Iron Throne belongs to my family. My brother is the rightful ruler. Naruto almost tore his hair out. Forget it. Let's hear opinions. Do you really want to see Viserys sit on the Iron Throne? Do you really think your brother deserves to be king? Because I can guarantee he'll never set eyes on any land in Westeros. Daenerys looked at Naruto trembling as she took a deep breath. Your brother will die here in Essos. Either by me or by the Dothraki. You, on the other hand, have much to look forward to. If I can get rid of Khal Drogo, we can get out of here and I can show you a world you never thought existed. The assassin knocked the training sword out of his hand and threw it aside before handing him a real sword. You're right. The only person in charge of your destiny is you, so I'll let you choose. Stand up and fight for something better, or retreat and live for something worse. Naruto took a few steps back and watched as the girl decided her own fate, and smiled as he held the sword and got into a fighting stance. I'm done standing aside. I'm ready to fight for a better life. Good. The smile never left his face as he unsheathed his Valyrian steel sword. I'm done coddling you and keeping you from realizing your true potential. From now on, as long as you're willing to fight and do whatever it takes, I'll keep you updated, but I promise it won't be easy. I'll push you harder and harder every day. If we're going to survive, we'll do it together. Daenerys nodded as the two circled each other. I heard that when my mother was 9 months pregnant with me, she helped fight off a group of savages. I don't know how true that is, but if she could supposedly do that, then you can do this. He quickly charged at Daenerys and smiled when she managed to raise her sword to block his attack. As they locked swords, Daenerys saw the smile on his face and won her own. This caused the smile on Naruto's face to fall as he used his strength to swing his swords and make her drop her own. Before she knew it, his sword was at her throat. Dead, he removed his sword and turned his back on her as he walked away. This isn't a game. I thought you were serious about this. I guess I was wrong. Daenerys didn't let him finish as she grabbed her sword and charged at Naruto, attacking him. He skillfully dodged all of her attacks with a wide grin on his face, getting better at it. I've been watching you and your brother since I arrived in Pentos. I've noticed things. She leaned her entire upper body back as she made a sweeping motion toward his head. Your brother claims to be a dragon, but he couldn't be more wrong. He surprised her when he finally raised his sword to block her slash, and she noticed the dangerous look in his eyes. You are the last dragon of House Targaryen, and I will teach you to breathe fire. Chapter 7. Vies Dothrak. Naruto rode alongside Daenerys, Yora, and Viserys as they approached the only Dothraki city. Vies Dothrak. The city of horses, Viserys sneered. A pile of mud. Mud, shit, and twigs. The best these savages can come up with. Daenerys looked at her brother. These are my people now. You shouldn't call them savages. Naruto nodded approvingly as Viserys looked at the Khaleesi. I'll call them what I want, because they are my people. This is my army. Khal Drogo is marching the wrong way with my army. Well, even if that's true, you should keep your mouth shut. It would be a shame if someone knew how you talked about them. Viserys snarled, strode forward, and entered the city as Daenerys glared at Naruto. If my brother were given a Dothraki army, could he conquer the 7 kingdoms? Naruto shrugged. The Dothraki have never crossed the narrow sea. They fear any water their horses can't drink. But did they do it? The assassin rubbed his chin in thought before answering. Robert Baratheon is hot-headed and quick to violence. He is foolish enough to face the Dothraki in open battle. That would result in thousands of men being slaughtered. But the men who advise him are different. They would have him hide in castles, and the Dothraki are not built for siege. Do you know these men? No, but Yora can. Daenerys turned to Yora, who nodded. I fought alongside them once, long ago. Now Ned Stark wants my head. He drove me from my land. You sold slaves. Yeah, because? The knight looked at Naruto before sighing. He had no money and an expensive wife. And where is she now? Yora looked solemn as he answered Naruto's question. Somewhere else, with another man. Naruto remained silent as they rode toward the city. He heard a screech and looked up to see an eagle soaring above. I'll be right back. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto left them behind in the city. The killer rode for a few minutes before seeing the eagle perched in a tree with a message tied around its foot. The assassin removed the note from the bird and gently rubbed his head as he stared at the blank sheet of paper. His eyes glowed slightly as he activated his eagle vision and revealed a secret message. The king has ordered the death of the Targaryen child. He believes she is pregnant. Naruto's eyes widened as he jumped back onto his horse and took off in his previous direction. As he rode, his mind raced. As far as he knew, news of Daenerys' pregnancy hadn't yet left the Khalasar company. which meant either Yora or Viserys tipped someone off, and he knew full well that Viserys couldn't make contact with anyone in Westeros, so that only left one suspect. The assassin rode into the city and saw a head of silver blonde hair, but snarled when he saw the former Lord of Bear Island standing next to it. Yora, do you mind if I talk to you privately? The knight looked at Naruto in surprise, but nodded before following him into a nearby alley. Daenerys gave Naruto a puzzled look, but her handmaidens continued escorting her through the city. Naruto, what can I do for dash? The knight was interrupted when Naruto punched him in the face, knocking him to the ground. What is the meaning of th dash? Once again he was interrupted when the killer kicked him hard in the stomach. Now I'm going to talk and you're going to listen to me. Naruto drew Kurama and Yora's eyes to the ruby orbs of the sword. What are you doing, Naruto? I told Daenerys I would protect her. And despite my better judgment, I thought we were on the same page, but now I realize I was wrong. What is it, dash? Don't play dumb with me. Yora looked into Naruto's eyes and sighed. I offered a pardon. A chance to go home. A chance to redeem myself, and all I had to do was inform the king's small council. Naruto nodded and surprised Yora when he put away his sword. I'll be honest with you, Yora. I'm really pissed off. But I know how to turn a terrible situation into a good one. Besides, I need an ally for my grand finale. What are you talking about? Naruto just chuckled as he strapped the sword to his waist. The less you know, the better. But know this, all your letters to the small council will be read by me first, and if I think you're trying to trick me, then this friendly conversation we're having right now will win out. It'll be just as enjoyable next time. Yora laughed as he spat blood from his mouth. You call this friendly? Naruto only gave Yora one last look before leaving the knight lying in the alley. A few hours later, Naruto sat outside Daenerys' tent, balancing the tip of a three-pronged kuni on his finger. His mind was racing with ideas. Normally, he made plans on the fly, but now he had to take the long view. That's why he decided not to take Yora's head. Lord Jiraiya told him that to survive, he had to be able to create, adapt, and execute a plan. His thoughts were interrupted by Viserys dragging Doria into the tent. Daenerys was sitting in her tent talking with Eri, who was preparing dinner. They were soon interrupted when Viserys burst in and threw Doria to the ground. You sent this hitch to order me around, he screamed as Doria begged for Daenerys' forgiveness. I should have sent you back. Silence, it's okay now. She looked at Eri. Please help her up. Eri nodded as she led the girl out of the dwelling and glanced at Naruto, whom Viserys had yet to notice standing in the doorway. Why did you hit her? I struck because I need you to know that you don't command me. Viserys snarled. I wasn't ordering you around. Daenerys extended her arm to appease him. I just wanted to invite you to dinner. He pointed to the food Eri had already prepared. You think I want to eat the shit that girl, that pile of filth, created? He spat before noticing a piece of cloth on a table. What is this? It's a gift for you. Daenerys hoped he liked it. It was supposed to be an olive branch. Her hopes were soon dashed when he looked at her again, hatred and malice consuming his face. Dothraki rags. He sneered. Are you going to dress me now? Please. Daenerys moaned. This stinks of manure. He threw the rags and a gold necklace at her. All of it. For. She looked on the verge of tears, but he kept screaming. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Naruto standing in the corner. Stop. He tried again, harder. You'd turn me into one of them, wouldn't you? Next, you'd want to braid my hair. You are not entitled to a braid. You have not yet won a victory. Daenerys hissed and Viserys looked horrified by her tone while Naruto snickered. You won't answer me, you little jerk! He slapped her with all his might, sending her sprawling. He quickly grabbed her before she could even try to get up. You little hitch, horse lord, and now you've awakened the dragon, he grunted as he tried to control his arms. Daenerys quickly grabbed a fallen necklace and slammed it across his face. By then, Naruto had drawn Kurama and held the tip of the blade against her neck, drawing blood. He looked at Daenerys, who looked down at her brother and smiled at the fire in his eyes as he reached out and helped her up. As he stood up, he straightened his back and looked at his brother, who looked ready to urinate with the tip of Naruto's deadly blade pressed against his skin. I am a Khaleesi of the Dothraki. I am the wife of the Great Khal and I carry his child within me. Viserys looked at his sister but didn't say a word. The only reason I'm letting you live is so you know I spared your life. Now go! Viserys looked ready to protest, but a look from Naruto silenced him and he quickly ran out of the room. The assassin looked at Daenerys with pride in his eyes. Let it out. Daenerys looked at him and let out a sigh she didn't know she was holding. I can't believe I just did that. Well, believe it. The young Targaryen smiling went to close the distance, but Naruto raised his hand to stop her. Not here. Now we have to keep up appearances more than ever. Daenerys nodded as Naruto put away his sword. I'm proud of you. And with that, the assassin walked away, leaving Daenerys alone. Chapter 8. A horse heart. Eri nodded and Naruto almost vomited in his mouth. He has to eat a raw horse heart. It's tradition. If she finishes the whole heart, the baby will be blessed. Naruto scoffed. Well, that tradition sucks. The two were currently walking through the Vies Dothrak market, collecting supplies for the upcoming ceremony. The maiden was tasked with preparing for the ceremony and asked the assassin to accompany her. Do you have traditions? Naruto looked at the bracelets on his wrist. Yes, I have traditions. Flashback. A young Naruto smiled as he held onto the wall of the building he was currently expanding. Sweat ran down his young body as the sun shone down on him. Any normal child would feel terrible in this situation, but Naruto felt alive. The boy was wearing black shorts, an orange shirt, and black sandals. He reached for the top ledge of the building and kicked his legs over the side of the building, causing his body to do a handstand on the ledge. He lowered his arms and stood up. Naruto smiled as he spread his arms and took a deep breath as he looked at the city in front of him. It was protected and hidden by a giant mountain range on one side and a vast forest on the other. People would normally approach the village, but the protectors would turn them away or send them back. He was brought out of his thoughts by a voice behind him. You thought you could escape? Naruto smiled as he turned his head to look at the person behind him. Of course not, Mentor Irika. Irika was of average height with brown hair tied back in a ponytail. He wore black pants and a black shirt with a green vest over it. His most notable feature was the scar that ran across his nose, almost from one cheek to the other. You have defaced the statues of great masters. Naruto ignored Irika as an eagle landed on a wooden pole hanging from the side of the building. He slowly made his way to the pole, and the bird landed on his shoulder as he closed his eyes and let his senses take in his surroundings. He slowly opened his arms as the bird flapped its wings and jumped off his shoulders. Naruto slowly leaned forward and landed right behind the bird, leaving a smiling Irika alone on the rooftop. End of flashback. Traditions are important, but this is different. It's not right. The two gathered what they needed and made their way through the market where, surprisingly, they ran into Daenerys and Yora doing some shopping of their own. Eri quickly bowed her head, while Naruto smiled. Khaleesi. Daenerys smiled back at Naruto and gave Eri a quick nod of acknowledgement, but only Yora caught the quick flash of jealousy that appeared in the young woman's eyes. What are you two doing? Naruto shrugged as they passed a weapon stand and looked at some knives. Eri asked me to help you prepare for your ritual tonight. Speaking of which, we'll have to talk later. The Targaryen nodded and turned her attention to a wine merchant who was boldly boasting about his drinks. Khaleesi, you should try some of my wine. Just a drop and you'll want to name your child after me. Naruto laughed at the idea and Daenerys smiled kindly. Well, now I must try this. The man looked at Daenerys, trembling as he spoke in the common tongue as Doria stepped forward. You have the honor of addressing Daenerys of the House Targaryen, Khaleesi of the Riders and Princess of the Seven Kingdoms. Naruto didn't show it, but he noticed how the man's demeanor changed at the mention of his name, and realized that Yora noticed it as well. My apologies, Princess. The man went to bow but Daenerys stopped him. No need to apologize, my friend, and please no need to bow down. Now, how about that wine? The man quickly threw the cup to the floor. That's Dornish trash unfit for a princess. I have a dry red from the arbor, nectar of the gods. Daenerys smiled as Naruto looked at the man with cold eyes. Let me give you a barrel as a gift. He ran to his little shop and returned with a barrel of wine. I am honored, sir. The honor is all mine. A Dothraki rider stepped forward and took the barrel. You know that there are many in your homeland who await your return, your grace. I hope to return your kindness someday. Leave the barrel. Everyone looked at Naruto in confusion, but his eyes never left the merchants, and what he saw confirmed his suspicions. Daenerys looked at Naruto, who was still locked in the merchant. Is there something wrong? Nothing, I'd just like to take a sip. Naruto stepped forward and the merchant's eyes fell on the leaf at Naruto's hip. Wine is for Khaleesi, not a servant. The merchant went to return it to the Dothraki rider but Eri spoke. You are heading Naruto Blood Rider to Khal Drogo. The man gulped and Naruto tightened his grip on his sword. I said open it. Daenerys was now annoyed that this man had called her lover a servant, and raised an eyebrow when the merchant looked at her. He nodded slightly before placing the barrel on a nearby cask. He uncorked it, and turned back to the party. Pour! His voice was strong and firm, and Daenerys could feel the power and authority behind his words. It would be a crime to drink such a rich wine without giving it time to vent, the merchant declared nervously. Naruto noticed a drop of sweat trickling down his forehead. Do as he says. Daenerys was now also alert and wary of the merchant. As the princess commands. He then filled a small cup and handed it to Naruto. As the assassin smelled the wine, the merchant spoke again. Sweet, isn't it? Naruto nodded. Can you smell the fruit, sir? The merchant gave him a slightly nervous smile. Try it, my lord. Naruto looked at Daenerys and smiled. Tell me this isn't the best wine that's ever touched your tongue. Naruto brought the cup to his lips, still smiling, before lowering the cup and handing it to the merchant. Why don't you take the first sip? I doubt a man such as yourself can enjoy the fruits of his lineage very often. He handed the cup back to the merchant, who looked between him and Daenerys. Me? I assure you I'm not worthy of the grape harvest. Besides, I'm not so poor that I wouldn't partake of my own livestock from time to time. You will drink it, Daenerys ordered, annoyed by the man's attempts to avoid drinking. The man nodded slightly as he took the cup. He raised it in a silent cheer before bringing it to his lips. Instead of drinking it, he threw the cup to the ground and pushed Naruto as he ran. The assassin chuckled as he removed a three-pronged kunai from his belt. He casually flipped it in his hand before throwing it with all his might. The blade embedded itself in the merchant's lower back, and he instantly fell to the ground. Some riders went to pick him up, but Naruto stopped them as he knelt beside the man. So the Dothraki way would be to tie you to the back of Khaleesi's horse and force you to walk until you fall off, and then be dragged until you die. But thanks to my incredible aim, I highly doubt you'd be able to stand, let alone walk ever again. The man looked at Naruto and spat at him, but the assassin laughed as he wiped his cheek. You know that if I hadn't been here, you would have gotten away with it, but I think Ser Yora would have noticed as well. See, it was your eyes that gave you away. They lit up like the sun when you discovered who the Khaleesi really was. That was enough to raise suspicion, but you confirmed everything when I asked you to pour a cup. Naruto removed his sword from the man's back and walked toward the wine shop. All eyes were on him as he picked up the barrel of poison wine. You know that poison is an effective tool when used discreetly. You, my friend, were too forceful in your attempt, but worry not. Your poison will be used today, all of it. He nodded to the riders as two grabbed him and held him in a kneeling position, while another grabbed a horn-shaped cup and broke off the tip, making a funnel. The funnel was shoved down the man's throat, muffling his screams. Look away, Khaleesi. Daenerys shook her head and watched as Naruto poured the poison down the man's throat and forced him to drink it all. When the barrel was empty, Naruto tossed it aside and watched as the merchant clawed at his throat as the poison took effect quickly. I have a friend in Dorne who's very good with poison. She's a big believer in how it can be used to kill someone. I'm sure drowning someone in it will surpass anything she's ever done. With that, Naruto watched as the last breath left the merchant's body before he went limp. The assassin shook his head before walking toward Daenerys. I'm sorry you had to see Khaleesi. Eri, please take her back to her hut. Yora, Doria, please come with me. We have some things to discuss. A few hours later, Naruto entered Daenerys' hut and immediately noticed a large Dothraki presence. He ignored them and immediately headed to Daenerys. Khaleesi, I'd like to apologize once again. You shouldn't have seen that, the Targaryen smiled. It's quite alright, Naruto. If it weren't for you, I'd be dead. Naruto nodded and Drogo approached him. Naruto, blood of my blood. You have saved the moon from me and for that I will reward you. Naruto shook his head, but Drogo paid no attention. Eri takes a step forward. All eyes turned to the maiden as she timidly walked towards the call and bowed her head. Blood of my blood, as a reward for your action I grant you Eri as your wife. Eri blushed and Naruto chuckled. I thank you, my call, but it's unnecessary. Drogo laughed and patted Naruto on the shoulder. Nonsense! We'll celebrate tomorrow, but from now on she's yours. Naruto sighed and looked at Eri, who seemed to find the floor extremely interesting, as Drogo began to leave the hut. Wait, my call! Drogo turned around and looked at Naruto. I have a little tradition where I'm from, a hunt. Here the Dothraki have the wife walk a path to show the child's strength, while where I'm from the father walks one. Drogo looked at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Explain, the assassin smiled. The hunt is designed to showcase the father's strength in the hopes that it will be passed on to the son. Naruto smiled when he saw the brief smile that appeared on the call's face. If we're going hunting, we should leave early so we don't miss the ceremony. Naruto nodded. There have been sightings of a saber-toothed cat nearby. I'll get my weapons and we'll leave immediately. Drogo nodded and left. His other two blood riders followed him and looked at Naruto as he left. Naruto let out a sigh and looked at Daenerys. Can we talk alone? Daenerys smiled and looked at Eri, who was the only other person in the hut. I think Drogo made it clear that she was yours now. Naruto looked into her eyes and saw both amusement and jealousy. Eri, please give us a moment. We can talk later. Eri nodded quickly and left as Naruto scratched the back of his neck. He was brought out of his thoughts when he was grabbed from behind and spun around. Before he could protest, Daenerys crushed her lips against his and Naruto responded quickly. Her hands gripped his hair as their tongues fought for dominance and Naruto could only smile as he pulled away to take a breath. We shouldn't do this here. Daenerys gave a predatory smile. Don't act like you didn't enjoy it, the killer laughed. Oh, I definitely did. He went in for another kiss, but Daenerys surprised him when she pushed him against a nearby pillar, and surprised him even more when she grabbed his cock and squeezed it. You belong to me, you better remember that. She crushed her lips against his again, and Naruto could only moan as she slid her hands under his shirt and rubbed his toned abdomen, while her hands sought out his ass. The Targaryen smiled against her lips as his hands slid down his abdomen and into his pants. I see your lessons with Doria have paid off. Daenerys slightly bit her lower lip. There's so much more I want to show you. Then you'll have the opportunity because if the plan works by this time tomorrow, we'll be free and on our way to Karth. Are you serious? Naruto nodded and could see the excitement in his eyes. I'm going to kill Drogo and his blood riders on this little hunting trip. Daenerys nodded as he walked over to her bed and sat down. Do you think you and Yora can handle them alone? She looked at Naruto who looked down. That? Naruto sighed. I'm going alone. Her eyes widened in surprise before she looked at him. You're not going alone. You're taking Ser Yora with you. Naruto smiled. I like this new protective you. She's extremely hexy. Daenerys wasn't amused and Naruto could only laugh. Yora won't come with me because he'll be with you while you kill Viserys. He removed Kurama from his hip and held it out for her to take. She took the blade and looked into the fox's ruby eyes. If I take this, what will you use against Drogo? It hurts me that you think I need Kurama to kill Drogo. Daenerys looked at the smile on his face and couldn't help but worry even more. She took his hand and brought it to her cheek. I have no doubt you can beat Kotho and Hago, but Drogo has never been beaten. I don't want you to die. The last female Targaryen looked into the assassin's eyes with tears streaming down her face. I'm not going to die. I know I can beat Drogo. Just like I know you can kill Viserys, and when that's done, you and Yora will gather everyone loyal to you and meet at the rally point and wait for me. Yora has instructions on what to do if I don't return. Daenerys removed her hand from his cheek and placed it on her stomach, which now had a significant bulge. Please come back with us. I'm going to. He kissed her hand and turned to leave, but stopped just before leaving. See you soon. Outskirts of Vies Dothrak. Naruto, now dressed in his full assassin gear, led Drogo and the Blood Riders through the tall grass following imaginary trails. Since he had entrusted Daenerys with Kurama, he decided to bring two short swords that were now attached to his hip where Kurama used to be. He demonstrated bending down and picking up a random piece of soil and smelling it. The beast is near. He turned to Drogo and nodded. After you, my call. Drogo nodded as he drew his weapon and walked past Naruto and through the tall grass. He emerged at the edge of a cliff. Naruto watched as Drogo looked on in confusion, while Kotho and Hago stood beside him. The assassin took a deep breath before drawing one of his swords and plunging it into Kotho's chest. Before Hago could react, Naruto kicked him in the knee, his hidden blade sliding down his throat. Honestly, I thought it would be a lot harder. How dare you? Naruto could only smile. I will not allow your body to be burned. I will not give you that honor. The call threw his arak and Naruto quickly threw a three-pronged kunai at him, and watched as it embedded itself into Drogo's shoulder. Drogo just laughed as he pulled out the blade and threw it away. Beetles will feed on your eyes. Worms will crawl in your lungs. Drogo removed the daggers from his belt and threw them to the ground. The rain will fall on your rotting skin until nothing remains but bones. Naruto looked at Drogo's discarded weapons. You might want to pick them up. I'll take your swords once you're done with them. Naruto's smile fell as he and Drogo stood a few feet away from each other. Before the assassin could make a move, Drogo lashed out with speed Naruto didn't know he possessed and punched him in the chest. The blow forced him back, but Naruto immediately attacked with his left and then right sword. Drogo dodged both blows, but Naruto attacked in a pattern that had both arms crossed with a blade on either side of Drogo's neck. He quickly swung his arms inward hoping to decapitate the Call but was attacked and struck Naruto in the chest again. Naruto gritted his teeth and went to attack again, but all of his attacks were easily evaded by Drogo's surprising speed. Naruto went to slash again, but Drogo used his large forearm to knock Naruto's hand away, but once again Naruto was quick with his other sword and Drogo grabbed his arm and forced him back before kicking the back of one of his legs, forcing him to kneel and drop the sword. Naruto wasted no time pivoting on his knee in an attempt to slice through Drogo's midsection, but the Call easily blocked the attack, followed by a low slash that was blocked again as Naruto got back to his feet and went for another attack. This time Drogo grabbed his arm and pulled him aside. The Call finally attempted to slash Naruto's throat, but the blonde ducked back to avoid it. The two swung at the same time and locked swords, but Naruto was quickly pushed back and had to avoid another blow that would have killed him. The two exchanged a few blows, and Naruto made a wide swing that forced Drogo to dodge the attack, but gave him the opportunity to kick him in the back of the knee, forcing him to kneel again. Naruto went to swing his sword, but the larger man kicked him in the shoulder, forcing him to fall to the ground. He spun around just in time to block a slash and quickly went on the defensive. Drogo went to slash low, but Naruto used the toe of his boot to block and knock his sword away. He then went to slash at the larger man's face, but his arm was grabbed, and Drogo sliced through his forearm. The assassin grimaced, but quickly had to block more attacks as he retreated to the edge of the cliff. The two traded more blows and intertwined swords again, but this time Drogo drove his knee into Naruto's ribs, followed by a kick to the side that once again put Naruto on the ground. The assassin quickly scrambled to his feet, but was met with a sword pressed against the side of his neck. He had a moment to look at the wound caused by his kunai and the Call's swollen red eyes, which were filled with rage. "You should be proud. You survived longer than most." Naruto quickly used his sword to knock Drogo's sword away and punched him in the face. He then kicked him in the stomach, sending him to one knee as he grabbed his arm and twisted it, forcing the Call to drop his sword. The assassin raised his sword high to strike Drogo down, but the larger man evaded, and when Naruto went to raise his blade for a second strike, the Call caught the sword unbothered by the blade sinking into his hand. Naruto's shock was short-lived as Drogo punched him in the throat, then knocked the sword out of his hand and slashed down his side, leaving a deep gash. Naruto could only gasp for air as he stared at the blood soaking his robes. Naruto fell to his knees and Drogo smirked as he prepared to run his sword through his former blood riders. But then he dropped his sword as the world around him began to spin and his hands began to shake. Finally, Naruto stood up and punched Drogo in the face. The Call was pushed back a bit, but couldn't retaliate. "What did you do to me? Poison." He quickly used his foot to lift the fallen sword and wasted no time slashing at Drogo's knees, and thanks to the poison, he couldn't dodge. Naruto quickly spun around him and slashed at his back. "Goodbye, Drogo. You were a good opponent." With that, Naruto pierced Drogo through the heart and watched as the Call fell to the ground dead. Naruto sighed as he looked at the cut on his side. "I have to get to Daenerys." The killer picked up his weapons and started walking toward the meeting point. A few miles from Vies Dothrak, Daenerys stood with Yora. After killing Viserys, which turned out to be an extremely easy and boring task, they gathered whoever wanted to go out. "Khaleesi, we should get moving." The last Targaryen looked at the night. "We'll wait for Naruto, Khaleesi. Naruto gave me very specific instructions to go to Karth if he wasn't here by a certain time. We should get moving. When you and Drogo show up, Khalasar will come looking for you. We need to move now." Daenerys went to protest, but a voice interrupted her. "You should listen to it." Everyone turned to see Naruto holding his side, most of his outfit covered in blood. "Naruto!" Both Yora and Daenerys rushed to Naruto, who ignored them. "I'm fine, we have to get out of here now." Daenerys lifted her shirt and inspected her wound. "If we don't treat it, it will get infected." The assassin shook his head as he walked toward a horse. "We have to go. Now!" Daenerys looked into Naruto's eyes and knew there would be no argument. "Good, you win." Naruto smiled as he climbed onto a horse and Daenerys knew Khalasar began the long journey to Karth. Chapter 9. Naruto sighed as he led Daenerys and her Khalasar through the Red Waste. It had been over a week since their departure from Vies Dothrak, and they had yet to encounter any problems. The assassin, who had long since shed his robes and was riding his horse shirtless, looked at Daenerys and couldn't help but smile. While she still had plenty of room to grow as a leader and warrior, he was proud of how far she'd come since he first met her, especially after Yora's account of her final meeting with Viserys. His smile grew even wider as he looked at her now sporting a bump, then quickly realized he hadn't yet included in any of his messages that Daenerys was pregnant. "Tsunade is going to kill me." The assassin stopped pondering when he heard one of the horses give way. He quickly dismounted his own and watched as the animal took its last breath. Daenerys looked at him with worried eyes as the little Khalasar gathered around him. "We only have 2 horses left," Naruto sighed. "I know." She looked at the group of Dothraki who agreed to follow her into the desert. "I promised to protect them. I promised their enemies would die screaming. How am I supposed to make hunger scream? One of the few tricks I have yet to master." While the assassin seemed calm, the two were beginning to feel the effects of the harsh desert sun. And their wounds from the hissing fight with Drogo had yet to fully heal. "Does it ever end?" Naruto nodded. "Yes. And you're sure this is the right address?" He nodded as he pointed in one direction. "Head south and you'll hit Lazarine, where they'll kill us and take your dragon eggs." He pointed to another. "West has returned to the Dothraki Sea, where they will kill us." "Nobody is going to kill us. You're in no condition to fight. Neither are your people, and as much as I hate to say it, either am I. I underestimated Drogo, and now I'm paying the price for it. But if we keep going in our current direction, I should reach Karth in 2 days at most. Now stand up and be a force to your people." The last Targaryen smiled. "As you are mine." Naruto smiled and kissed her forehead. King's Landing. Sasuke lurked in the shadows of a tower in the Red Keep and watched the kings celebrate his name day. In the weeks following his coronation, the boy king had proven himself cruel and deserving of a sword through his heart, but Orochimaru forbade it. "You're always frowning, Sasuke. If you keep doing that, your face will probably be stuck on forever." The raven-haired assassin didn't spare a glance for the hooded figure behind him. "Why haven't we killed the idiot yet? A suitable leader has yet to be chosen. Lord Orochimaru says your old teammate Naruto is returning from a mission with Daenerys Targaryen. That sounds promising." Sasuke ignored the figure and watched as Tyrion Lannister approached the king. "Kabuto, when did the dwarf return?" The man now known as Kabuto smiled as he walked towards the window. "Not long ago, actually, but there are urgent matters. Lord Orochimaru requests your presence." The Uchiha watched as Tyrion walked towards the castle. "Tell him I'll be there after I take care of some things." Kabuto watched Sasuke leave the tower. So impatient. Sasuke left the tower and silently made his way through the Red Keep. He kept to the shadows and easily avoided the guards. He crossed the rafters and entered a small secret compartment above the small council chamber. He remained silent as he listened to Queen Cersei's harsh words. When Tyrion entered and Cersei dismissed the rest of the council, Sasuke waited, hoping to gain information, and couldn't help but smile when he heard that Arya Stark had escaped. With that news, Sasuke sneaked out of the castle and returned to Orochimaru's hideout. Without Arya Stark, the Lannisters were in a rather difficult situation. Could she be dead? Orochimaru shook his head. No. If she were dead, we'd know. Kabuto, what do you know? The girl was learning the art of water dancing before the attack. Her brother Jon Snow gave her a small, thin sword. A child was found dead with a small wound in the stomach. The likely explanation is that the girl killed him inside. She escaped. The Sannin nodded as he considered his options. The girl must be found, and not by the Lannisters. I will speak to my spies in the city, Kabuto, communicate with our men in the surrounding villages. If she came this far, she would have had to find a place to hide. Her identity is revealed, so keep your eyes peeled. Sasuke, since you have mastered the art of entering and exiting the Red Keep, you will be to keep an eye on the Lannisters, the moment they know something that I want to know as well. Sasuke nodded and turned to leave, but stopped. Before I came here, Kabuto told me you wanted to see me. Ah, yes. Just a bit of news. Stannis Baratheon has aligned himself with an old enemy of mine, a red priestess named Melisandre. A red priestess? I didn't think you'd be afraid of the powers of the Lord of Light. Orochimaru smiled. I'm not afraid, but it would be wise not to mock the Lord of Light's powers. But for now, don't worry about her. We have plenty on our plate, and Stannis isn't a problem right now. Now if you'll excuse me, you're both dismissed. North of the Wallcraster's lodge, Jon grumbled as he walked around the estate after his altercation with the Lord Commander. So you're a butler here. Too bad. I would have loved to teach you a few tricks with the Rangers. Jon turned to see Minato Namikaze standing behind him. You didn't come out with us, how did you get here? Minato smiled as he twirled a three-pronged kunai in his hand. I'm a bit special. The Lord Commander allows me to come and go as I please, but he asked me to stay on this little trip north. Why would I want you around? What makes you so special? Minato's smile widened as he pulled the blade out of the air. You'll know soon enough. Until then, keep this in mind for me. It might be helpful. Jon looked at the blade and saw strange writing on the handle. What does this mean? He looked up and found Minato gone. Not far away, Minato appeared before the Lord Commander, who jumped at his sudden appearance. I keep telling you not to do that. Minato laughed and rubbed the back of his neck before looking at Lord Mormont and speaking in a serious tone. So here, you want to know what the savages are doing? Mormont snorted. I want to know what's going on behind this damn wall. Are you sure? You shouldn't ignore these things. Tell me, Minato sighed. The savages are gathering to survive from an enemy you've already met here. The dead? Yeah, I don't know their exact plan, but they plan to get to the other side of the wall, over my dead body. I think we should let them in. The Lord Commander looked at him as if he had just said the worst thing in the world. Listen to me. I've traveled beyond the wall more times than any ranger before me in search of a fairy tale, but instead I found another but just as sinister, the Night King. And your friend Craster has been helping him. Mormont shook his head. Even if all this were true, I'd need proof before I'd allow a single wildling through the wall. Minato nodded. I know, and trust me, if you keep going north, you'll find your proof. King's Landing. Sasuke sat on his perch in the shadow of the Red Keep. The past few days had passed almost uneventfully as he watched the Queen and the small council wait for news about the Stark girl, but they seemed as lost as he was. His interest was piqued when he saw the boy king meeting with the Lord Commander of the City Guard. Not many things terrified Sasuke, but the order Joffrey gave did, and he immediately ran to Orochimaru. Sasuke, do you have any news about the girl for me? The raven-haired assassin shook his head. No, but I bring terrible news. The idiot king fears any claim to the throne that might overthrow him, so he has ordered the execution of every single bastard son Robert Baratheon fathered. The Sannin looked up from his papers and saw red and black eyes with 3 tomos looking at him. I understand how this hits home for you, Sasuke, but what do you want me to do? Help me get them out of the city and into the hidden city. Orochimaru saw the legendary Sharingan staring at him and knew his apprentice wouldn't let it pass. It won't be an easy task, especially since there are only 3 of us. Do you have any idea how many bastards the last king has? Sasuke smiled. No, but I'm sure you do, Orochimaru frowned. Approximately 19 in King's Landing alone. Sadly, I must admit we may need some help. He quickly started scribbling on a piece of paper and handed it to Sasuke. Take care of these and I'll take care of the rest. The killer looked at his list, which consisted of only 5 names. How are you going to get everyone else? Orochimaru smiled as he stood. Time to get reinforcements. Not long after, Sasuke entered the brothel owned by Peter Baelish dressed in his full assassin gear, including his sword. He ignored the indecent hex happening around him, and watched as a red-haired woman approached him and placed her hand on his shoulder. How can I help you today? She blinked and smiled seductively, but Sasuke ignored her advances. A friend asked me to spend time with Mahagen privately. The Uchiha took out several gold coins and dropped them into her hand. The woman's smile widened. Follow me, my lord. Sasuke was taken to a room where he waited until another red-haired woman entered. Are you Mahagen? Yes, my lord. How may I be of service today? Sasuke ignored her and studied the door, noting that there was no lock. Where is your daughter? Mahagen looked at him in surprise. Excuse me? Your daughter? I've heard her name is Bara. Where is she? Mahagen took a few steps away from Sasuke. Who are you? I'm the person trying to save your daughter's life now. Where is she? Mahagen looked at Sasuke frantically. What's going on? Sasuke quickly growled and got angry. Look, ma'am, I don't have time for this. I'll explain everything soon, but right now I need to know where your daughter is. She's upstairs in my bedrooms. The Uchiha nodded. Stay here. He poked his head out of the room and stopped the first person who passed by. Excuse me, miss. The women turned and stopped when they looked into the assassin's eyes that had transformed into the Sharingan. Go to Mahagen's room and bring Bara to me. Stay quiet and don't let them see you. It didn't take long for him to return with the sleeping baby, and Sasuke pulled out a cloak and handed it to Mahagen, who quickly put it on. The Uchiha activated his eagle vision and saw a group of gold cloaks enter the brothel. It's time to get out of here. He helped her out the window just as the door opened and 5 golden cloaks entered. The Uchiha wasted no time charging as he drew his sword. He blocked the first attack and quickly sliced through its midsection, spilling its guts onto the ground. He then stopped the next attack and stabbed the man's stomach and raised his sword so that it came out through the top of the man's skull. He sensed an attack coming and quickly spun around with his sword, slicing clean through the third man's head. He quickly spun around again and ducked as he swung his sword, nearly cutting the last 2 golden layers in half. The assassin quickly sheathed his sword and turned to Hagen, who looked at him in astonishment. "I'm sorry you had to see that, the red trash." Naruto sighed as he walked beside Daenerys, the two leading the Khalasar in the final hours of their journey to Karth. "Then tell me more about this Lord Jiraiya." Naruto has a weak laugh. "Ha, pervy sage is just an old man who spies on women to research his books. But he's also one of the strongest people I know. I'm proud of having studied for all these years." Naruto smiled as he thought about the first time he met Jiraiya. He went to speak, but his eyes quickly rolled to the back of his head as he fainted. "Naruto!" Daenerys was quickly at his side, as were Yora and Eri. "What's wrong with him?" The knight quickly checked Naruto's wounds, but saw that they were almost healed. He then checked his water skin, which he found to be completely dry. "He's dehydrated. We need to get him out of this desert, and fast." Daenerys nodded and looked at Naruto with a worried expression on her face. Yora put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, princess, he'll be fine." The Khaleesi nodded and turned to one of her bloodthirsty men. "Rikaro, you will ride to Karth. Tell them we are not far behind." The rider nodded and quickly mounted a horse before taking off. King's Landing. Sasuke was escorting his group of children along with some parents when he felt a presence. He looked around and saw no golden cloaks. "I've felt this presence before." The assassin closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Naruto stood in front of him. "Naruto, what are you doing here?" Naruto looked around and shrugged. "Honestly, I don't know. What's going on here?" Sasuke nodded at the women and children huddled against the wall. "Joffrey is a crazy brat who would rather burn the 7 kingdoms than lead. We are providing sanctuary for the bastard children of Robert Baratheon in one of Orochimaru's hideouts outside the city." "That's crazy." The Uchiha smirked before signaling for everyone to lean against the wall as 2 gold cloaks passed by. "Yes, and walking through the most dangerous desert in the world isn't." Naruto smiled and the 2 friends laughed. Sasuke sent the group into a tunnel and noticed a gold cloak watching him. "As much as I'd like to catch up, I'm a little busy." He drew his sword as the gold cloak charged. "It was good to see you again, Sasuke." "Your ass is fine, Naruto." The Uchiha attacked Naruto, whose image became distorted and the blade struck the golden cloak, killing him. Chapter 10. Outskirts of Karth. Daenerys and her Khalasar arrived at the gates of Karth and saw a group of armed soldiers marching, followed by a group of people who appeared to be the leaders. This caused Daenerys to turn to Yora. "I thought we were welcome. If you heard a Dothraki horde was approaching your city, you could do the same, Khaleesi." Dany looked at the group of 50 people behind her. "I'd hardly call this a horde." He glanced at Naruto's prone position on his horse before turning to the approaching group. "My name is Daenerys Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen." Daenerys looked surprised. "You know me, my lord." "Only by reputation, Khaleesi. And I'm not a lord, just a humble merchant. So what should I call you?" "Oh, my name is rather long and quite impossible for outsiders to pronounce. I am simply a spice trader. But we are the 13, charged with governing Karth, the greatest city that ever was or ever will be." He gestured to the group behind him as Daenerys took a deep breath as she remembered all the lessons and trust Naruto had given her. "The beauty of Karth is legendary. The merchant raised his finger to silence Daenerys. "May I ask how you were able to escape a Khalasar?" Daenerys was surprised by the question. "Forgive me? I said how you escaped from a Khalasar. The news is that Khal Drogo is dead and you're not a member of the Dash Khaleen. So you somehow escaped, and the only way I can see that is if you had dragons." Daenerys looked at the man in bewilderment. "Dragons? Yes, that would be very fitting for a Targaryen." "Then show us the dragons." Daenerys glanced at Naruto's prone body before turning back to the merchant. "My friend, we have traveled far. We have no food, no water. Once I see my people fed, I would be honored. Forgive me, but no man alive has ever seen a live dragon. Some of my friends refuse to believe my accusations. All I ask is that I not be proven a liar." Daenerys looked at the clearly delirious man and closed her fist, reining in her anger. "If I told you I had dragons, it would be a lie, and I'm not a liar. Where I come from, guests are treated with respect, not insulted at the gates." Then maybe you should go back to where you came from. We wish you the best. The man turned around and started walking away. What are you doing? You promised to see me. The man looked at her in confusion. We've received you. Here we are, and here you are. If you don't let us in, we'll all die. She placed her hand on her swollen belly. All of us, which we will deeply regret. But Qarth did not become the greatest city it ever was or ever will be by allowing the savage Dothraki through its gates. With that, the merchant and the rest of the 13 turned to leave. Daenerys's eyes burned like fire, and her fist was so tightly clenched that her nails bled, which Yora noticed. Khaleesi, please be careful. Daenerys marched towards the 13, ignoring her guards who drew their weapons. 13. When my armies grow, we will reclaim what was stolen from me and destroy those who have wronged me. We will destroy armies and cities. If I really had dragons like you think I do, then you wouldn't want to be on that list. This sparked a chatter among the members of the 13, but the merchant silenced them. I see you are a true Targaryen. Only, as you said a moment ago, if we don't let you into the city, everyone will die. And so, the merchant was interrupted by another member of the 13. To retreat in fear from a pregnant girl is unbecoming of the greatest city that has ever existed or ever will exist. The merchant looked at his companion. The discussion is over, Zaro, Zoe and Daxos. The 13 have spoken, Zaro smiled. I'm one of the 13, and I'm still talking. The merchant looked at Zaro with disgust. The girl is threatening to burn down our town, and you'd like to invite her for a glass of wine? Well, I don't think a woman in her condition would be drinking wine, but she is the last Targaryen. Do you expect her to watch her people starve without breathing fire? I think we can allow some Dothraki through our gates without dooming our city. After all, here I am, a wildling from the Summer Isles, and Qarth still stands. He gave Daenerys a reassuring smile, but it unsettled Yora. Our decision is final, Zaro nodded. Very well. I summon Samai. Some of the 13 stared at Zaro in shock as he pulled out a dagger and cut his palm. I will answer for her and her people according to the law. He showed everyone his bloody palm, and the merchant looked at him. Be it on your head. Daenerys turned to Naruto and stroked his hair. Hold on, my love. No one noticed the 3 hooded figures standing in the shadows at the top of the wall. The next day, Naruto groaned as he opened his eyes. It's about time, Gaki. Naruto's eyes fell on a man he instantly recognized, and he relaxed. Pervy Sage, it's good to see you again. The assassin slowly sat up in bed and took in his surroundings. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on a white-haired man who appeared to be in his 40s. The man was tall, heavy-set, and fair-skinned. He had a wart on the left side of his nose and waist-length, spiky white hair that hung down to his lower body and was tied in a ponytail with 2 bangs framing his face. His attire consisted of a green short shirt, kimono, and matching pants, underneath which he wore chain-mail armor that was visible on his wrists and ankles. He also wore armbands similar to Naruto's, a black belt, black boots, and a red haori with 2 yellow circles on either side. He also had a tattoo of the assassin symbol on his left palm. Likewise, although you seem to have seen better days, Naruto laughed as he looked at her bandaged abdomen. How is Daenerys? Jiraiya smiled. She's a fine woman. I have to say I approve of your choice of women. I haven't seen her naked yet, but I got a glimpse through the rags she wore. Naruto growled and threw his boot that was next to the bed at Jiraiya's face. Young as ever. I even heard you have a Dothraki wife. I couldn't be prouder. Another outburst followed and the two shared a laugh. In all seriousness, I'm happy you're alive. Surviving the Dothraki is a skill many masters couldn't dream of achieving, let alone defeating a Khal like Drogo. I've heard tales of his strength, and judging by your condition, it wasn't all hype. Naruto nodded. Yes, he was a seasoned warrior with incredible brute strength and surprising speed. But I took care of that. The killer got out of bed and put on a shirt. So what's the reason you're here in Qarth? Jiraiya waved him off. Don't worry about that for now. You've had a long mission, so relax a little. I have to do some research, but I'll see you around. The Sannin headed to the window just as the door opened to reveal a very pregnant Daenerys in a blue dress. You're awake. Her arms were quickly around his neck as she kissed him. She tangled her hands in his hair, but before things could go too far, Naruto broke off the kiss. I'm happy you're both okay. He put his hands on her stomach and leaned in to give her a kiss. It's all thanks to you. If it weren't for you, I would never have had the courage to stand up to my brother. Naruto smiled and took in Daenerys' appearance. Where are you going all dressed up? He grabbed her hand and turned her around and placed his hands on her stomach as he buried his face in the crook of her neck, absorbing her scent. Zaro, a member of the 13 here in Karth, has invited me to a feast. He vouched for me to be allowed safe passage into the city. This is also his home we are in. It would be rude to refuse his offer, so that means you will be coming as well. The expression on his face left no room for argument, and not long after, Daenerys dragged the assassin away and encountered several people he cared less about. After a while, he grew bored and began robbing many of the partygoers just to challenge their skill at returning items before they were discovered missing. It was a game he and Sasuke would play as children, and it was a good way to kill time. While pretending to listen to the conversation, he noticed Yora and some members of Daenerys' Khalasar inspecting a statue. Naruto touched Daenerys on the shoulder and nodded toward the unfolding scene. As he apologized, the assassin went to follow her, but a man stood in front of him. You must be Naruto, it's good to see you up. Naruto studied the man in front of him and didn't see an immediate threat, but as he knew, appearances could be deceiving. The man was a few inches taller than him and was a little plump. Who are you? The man smiled. My name is Zaro. I'm a member of the 13, and this is my party. How are you enjoying it? Naruto shrugged. The last party I attended ended with me fighting for my life, so as long as that doesn't happen, it'll be better than that one. Zaro laughed, but then a silence fell between the two as Naruto watched Daenerys deal with her riders before returning his attention to the merchant. So Zaro, tell me, why did you go out of your way to allow Daenerys and her Dothraki Khalasar into the city? The merchant smiled. I couldn't leave someone as beautiful as the Khaleesi in the wasteland, so I did the gentlemanly thing. Naruto poked his head in. So you expect me to believe you allowed a Dothraki horde into your city because Daenerys is beautiful? I find that hard to believe, sorry. Naruto walked away from the merchant as a bald man approached Daenerys, Zaro following close behind him, and the two men watched the bald man clone himself before everyone's eyes. While Zaro shrugged it off as a cheap parlor trick, Naruto knew better. Zaro led Daenerys away, but the princess shot Naruto a look first, which he returned with a nod. Though she didn't possess eagle vision, he had taught her to be vigilant. Besides, though she couldn't see him, she had no doubt that Jiraiya was creeping around somewhere, and there was also Yora never far from Daenerys. The murderer was about to leave, but a voice stopped him. You take care of her. The blonde assassin turned around and saw a woman, whose face was covered by a golden mask. I know you? I know you. Naruto Uzumaki, son of the legendary Yellow Flash. Naruto's jaw clenched, and he had to fight the urge not to draw his hidden blade. Who are you? The masked woman took a step forward. I am no one. But she is the mother of dragons, and now more than ever she needs true protectors. Naruto gave the woman a puzzled expression as his gaze fell on Daenerys. Mother of dragons? What does that mean? They will come day and night to see wonder reborn in the world. And when they see, they will desire, for dragons are fire made flesh. And fire is power. With that, she walked away. Naruto tried to follow her, but she seemingly vanished into thin air. After a few hours of playing dog and pony, Naruto and Daenerys returned to their rooms. The two walked through the halls of Zaro's house hand in hand. I miss you, Naruto smiled. I didn't go anywhere, I know, but I thought I was going to lose you. It'll take a lot more than that to get rid of me. Because now I have something that will make me fight harder, a family. He looked at his stomach and smiled. I can't leave them yet. The two look at each other and smile as Daenerys leads him to her room. When they arrived, Dany went to kiss him, but Naruto stopped her. We need to talk. Daenerys looked at him in shock. Now, she squeezed his cock for emphasis, and as much as Naruto wanted to continue, he couldn't. Yes, now I have something important to tell you. He carried her to the bed and took a deep breath. I'm not who you think I am. What does that mean? It means I've been lying to you. About the real reason I was in Pentos. What do you mean? I am an assassin dispatched by a group known as the Brotherhood. We maintain order in the 7 kingdoms from the shadows. I was sent here to determine if your brother was a threat, and if I was going to take him out before he could amass an army. The room fell into a long silence, the only sound being the howling of the wind. After what seemed like hours, Daenerys finally spoke. So, it was all a lie? Naruto shook his head. No. Everything I felt, everything I feel for you is real. You're my heart, Daenerys, and that's why I had to get this out now. If you want me to go, I understand. The assassin started to leave, but Daenerys grabbed his arm and pulled him towards her, crashing her lips against his. The kiss lasted for a few moments, and when the two broke apart, Khaleesi gave her lover a loving smile. Naruto, you freed me. Not just from my brother and Drogo, but from myself. Before you, I was a shy girl afraid of any real confrontation, but now I am a dragon. His hand slid down to her stomach. Of course you gave me this amazing bundle of joy that I can't wait to hold in my arms and shower with all the love I was denied as a child. Naruto smiled. So you're not mad at me? Daenerys grabbed him by the neck and pulled him on top of her. Oh, I'm angry. But you can spend the rest of your life making it up to me. The two shared a tender, passionate kiss, and when it ended, violet eyes locked with sapphires. Naruto, I love you. All of you. Something lit up in Naruto's eyes. Foregoing further words, he leaned in and captured Dany's lips in a kiss. Dany's eyes closed. Naruto's wet lips played passionately with hers, gently tugging and audibly flicking. Dany soon felt his tongue slip past her lips. She opened her mouth for him, letting his tongue enter to smear hers. It was a long-lasting kiss. Dany concentrated on the sensation of their lips intertwined and their tongues dancing. Then, in a single swift flourish, Naruto wrapped one strong arm around Dany's back and squeezed her soft bottom with the large hand of his other, not to touch her, but to lift her. Naruto lifted Dany into his arms with astonishing ease, like a child picking up a doll. He wrapped her legs around his hips to make carrying her easier, but felt it wasn't necessary. Naruto carried her to his bed, and sat her on the edge, where she released him from her legs. Dany helped Naruto undress her. As he began to unbutton and remove her sandals, she pulled her dress over her head. Next, as he pulled her petticoat down her legs and lifted her up, she reached up and unhooked her bra. When it came off and fell off, her nakedness was completely exposed to him. Dany was pale, whiter than milk, and growing paler, barely touched by the sun. Her breasts were somewhat small, but perky and well-formed. Her small nipples were bright pink, the same color as the gap between her legs. Naruto's hands were all over Dany in an instant, caressing her, admiring the softness and smoothness of her nubile flesh. First he fondled her sensitive breasts, cupping and fondling them. He was gentle enough that it didn't hurt. Then his hands grazed her swollen stomach as they moved south. Naruto grabbed her slender thighs and caressed them. Soon, a warmth surged through Dany's loins. Before Naruto could part her legs, Dany parted them for him, opening them wide. Naruto glanced at that place between them, the cleft of thin pink lips tucked into a slit covered in soft silvery blonde hair. Naruto crouched down. Since his bed mattress was high off the floor, he didn't have to bend down far. He inched his head closer and closer between Dany's spread legs, until she could feel his hot breath blowing at her opening. When Naruto opened her silver-haired slit with his thumb and forefinger, he found her inner rose glistening. After staring at it for a moment, he withdrew his hand and let her flesh close. Then, suddenly, Naruto dove down, nestled his nose in her short hair, and began kissing Dany in that spot between her legs. Before, in his lust, Naruto had never lingered in that spot. Before, he seemed to have kissed Dany there just long enough to further moisten and swell her flesh, to prepare her for his manhood. But that night he lingered. Naruto kissed Dany's slit with eager passion. His efforts were numerous and varied. First he ran the flat of his saliva-slicked slit through her blush, sliding that warm, wet muscle across a place that was even warmer and wetter. Then he took one of her inner lips into his mouth and rolled, and pulled on it until it came free. Then he closed his mouth over the small, hooded bud crowning her slit and sucked on it, placing it between his lips. The sharpness of the pleasure from that last act took Dany by surprise, and she moaned like a child. Lascivious sounds filled the bedroom as Naruto dined between Dany's legs. There were kisses, slurps, moans, and groans. The sounds only seemed wetter as time passed. Dany's pleasure grew from warm blossoms to hot pangs and then to burning beams of bliss. Her breathing quickened and she began to pant. The intensity of it was like nothing she had ever felt. An unfamiliar pressure began to build within her core, as if the string of a high harp were being pulled taut and taut. Dany's legs closed around Naruto's head, warming his ears with her soft thighs. Naruto! Naruto's eyes flicked up to hers when he heard her, but Dany didn't say another word. She wasn't sure whether to ask him to stop or ask for more. Naruto didn't stop. He gave her more. Naruto's efforts grew more fervent. His tongue brushed against her more firmly, his mouth rolled her lips faster, and he sucked on her butt harder. Dani found herself gyrating and bucking her hips as Naruto pleasured her, directing his lips and tongue exactly where she wanted them. Naruto followed those wordless instructions perfectly. When Naruto's hands ventured upward and squeezed her sensitive breasts, Dani let out a sudden, sharp scream. It was the loudest she had screamed in longer than she could remember. It wasn't from pain, but from pleasure. Naruto locked his eyes with hers again when he heard it, leering at her with his pale blue gaze. With his hands on her breasts, his mouth sucking on her wetness, and his icy eyes staring into hers, the tension inside Dani soon became too great for her to bear. When Naruto buried her bud beneath his tongue and stroked it up and down, she snapped. Dani's body tightened. Her eyes slammed shut, her shoulders bunched, her stomach tightened, and her thighs clamped down around Naruto's head. She screamed with every last breath she held in her lungs. Sharp contractions ripped through her as fiery bliss surged outward through her flesh, wave after wave. Dani squealed through gritted teeth as her body rocked against Naruto's face. As the last contraction left her, Dani's eyes cautiously opened, as did her closed thighs, releasing Naruto from her grasp. She looked down at him between her legs. He was staring at her swollen slit. A milky cream was now oozing from her rose. Dani didn't know what it was, but Naruto wasn't fazed by the sight. He leaned closer again and licked it with his tongue. After staring at Dani's swollen slit for a bit longer, Naruto stood up and began removing his clothes. When he was naked, he climbed onto the bed. "That's enough for tonight's love. I've heard it's bad to do certain things while pregnant." Daenerys could only nod, her mind still clouded with pleasure, as Naruto pulled her into his chest where the pair laid down in silence, Daenerys falling asleep to the sound of her lover's heartbeat. Chapter 11. From Craster Keep. Jon woke up in the middle of the night, his conversation with Sam and Gilly unsettling him. The girl wanted his help, but she refused to tell him what would happen if she gave birth to a boy. The bastard was pulled from his own thoughts by the sound of footsteps. He turned and saw Craster, holding a baby, heading into the woods. Gilly's words echoed in his head as he got up to follow. He followed the man with Longclaw clutched tightly in his hands, doing his best to remain unnoticed. The sound of chains rattling made Jon stop in his tracks as he looked around trying to find the source of the noise, but the approaching footsteps forced him to take cover behind a tree. The only thing he noticed was that there was no baby in his arms. After a few minutes of waiting to make sure the coast was clear, Jon emerged from his hiding place only to hear the sound of the baby crying. The Watcher quickly sprang into action, drawing his Valyrian steel sword as he ran at the sound of the child. By the time he reached the boy, it seemed Craster had abandoned him, but as Jon leaned back against a tree to catch his breath, a large figure appeared and grabbed him. Jon went to chase after him, but before he could, a hand fell on his shoulder, and all he saw was Craster's face before seeing nothing but darkness. King's Landing. Sasuke sighed as he sharpened his katana. It had been some time since he worked to save the former king's bastard children, and while they weren't able to save all of them, they were able to smuggle some out of the city where Orochimaru bought them safe passage to the hidden village. Since then, things had become relatively boring. His intrusions into the Red Keep continued as Orochimaru wanted him to keep an eye on the Stark girl. Speaking of the snake, he was surprised when the Sannin entered his room. 1. Lord Orochimaru. To what do I owe the pleasure of you stepping away from your experiments to speak with me? Sasuke never looked up from his sword as he ran a whetstone over it. Today I will take charge of your guard at the Red Keep. Sasuke stopped sharpening his sword and looked up to see Orochimaru standing over him with a giant sword strapped to his back. Why are you wasting your time? What about the new weapons option? The Sannin chuckled. You never see the whole picture, Sasuke. But I have some business to attend to at the fortress, and I have a mission for you. What kind of mission? Originally, I was attacking a bastard son of Robert Baratheon, who managed to escape the city without our help when I received word of a group of about 20 people heading toward the wall. Now, if I were to head north, it would be best to cover myself. Sasuke nodded. I'll go to King's Road immediately and try to catch the group. Orochimaru nodded. Good. And be alert, there are probably city vigilantes traveling around looking for Gendry Waters. Okay, so what are you doing in the Red Keep? Orochimaru smiled. There's something I must retrieve. The Sannin started to leave, but turned to Sasuke with a dark look. Remember to be careful out there, because the night is dark and full of terrors. Karth. Naruto smiled as he watched Daenerys have her hair braided by her handmaidens while he looked out the window. A maester had come the day before and claimed the baby would be born any day now, and Naruto couldn't be happier. Never in his life could he imagine himself being so happy. Growing up an orphan made him envious of all his friends. Many of them included them in their family activities, but it never felt right. Now here he was on the other side of the world about to start his own family. Naruto? The assassin was broken from his musings when Daenerys called out to him. I can't wait. The last Targaryen smiled as he took her hand and placed it on his stomach. Our son will be loved. Naruto couldn't contain the smile on his face. And one day our son will rule the 7 kingdoms. The smile disappeared from his face. Excuse me? Daenerys sighed as she signaled for her handmaidens to leave. Eri gave Naruto a look before leaving the room. I see you haven't spoken to Eri yet. I'll take care of that soon. But what do you mean our son will rule the 7 kingdoms? When I take my rightful place as queen, our daughter will be the heir to the throne. So you're going to wage war against Westeros? Daenerys glared at him. They killed my entire family. I've spent my entire life running from them. I've lived in fear for too long, and I won't give them the chance to hurt my son. Her eyes softened as she looked into Naruto's blue ones. And thanks to you, I now have the courage to breathe fire like a true dragon. I will cook what is rightfully mine, with fire and blood if necessary. Naruto was about to retort, but noticed 3 hooded figures standing in the adjacent building. I have to go, we'll finish this conversation later. He didn't wait for their response as he jumped out the window and chased after the 3. After years of training with him, Naruto easily recognized Jiraiya, but he didn't know the other 2, though one seemed strangely familiar. He followed them for a while before the 4 assassins entered a warehouse on the outskirts of town. When Naruto finally caught up with them, the 3 assassins were gathered around a large round table with the Brotherhood symbol engraved in the center. The walls of the room were lined with various weapons, while a workbench in the corner held some discarded blueprints and unfinished inventions. When he arrived at the table, everyone lowered their hoods, revealing their faces to the master assassin in training. Beside Jiraiya stood the master assassin and famous pirate captain Edward Kenway. Edward was as tall as Naruto with blonde hair tied in a knot behind his head. He wore white pants tucked into black boots. The robes were primarily blue with a white interior and consisted of a white undershirt and a white hood, which was connected to the robes themselves. The torso displayed an open collar. The outfit also featured 2 white shoulder belts, one on the undershirt and the other on the outside of the robes, with an assassin insignia near the right shoulder. The lower portion of the robes had 2 layers and were roughly the same length. The waist featured a wide red sash held by a white belt, which held a sword. Beside Edward was a friend Naruto hadn't seen in a few years, Tain Sand, one of Prince Oberyn Martell's bastard daughters. She wore a low-cut, loose-fitting Dornish dress with cutouts down the side, and pieces of leather armor around her legs, elbows, and forearms. She had olive skin, dark eyes, and short black hair covered by a turban. Attached to her belt were several curved daggers. It's good to see you again, Naruto. Tain gave him a sly, seductive smile, and once upon a time Naruto would have returned it, but an image of a pregnant Daenerys flashed through his mind, so he just sent a smirk. It's been a while, hasn't it, Tain? Naruto and Tain went through their initial recruitment training together. Her father, Oberyn, was a master assassin and had mentors in Dorne to train his daughters, but Tain wanted the original and authentic training experience, so her father sent her to the hidden city where she spent years alongside Naruto training in the basics of the Brotherhood. After that, Naruto visited Dorne many times for training and missions and always made time to see Tain. Before they could reach him, Jiraiya cleared his throat. As much as I'd like to base my next book on the undoubtedly looming love triangle, we have important matters to attend to. He nodded to Edward. As we all know, King Robert died some time ago, and now Joffrey sits on the throne. The little shit has been nothing but trouble since day one. He's plunged almost every kingdom into civil war. He took out a scroll and passed it to Naruto. Before his death, Lord Stark informed Stannis Baratheon that King Robert had no children with the Queen and that the entire royal family is fathered by the Queen's brother. So, for some reason, Lord Renly feels he should sit on the throne and has Tyrell's backing, so now he has the Reach and the Stormlands at his beck and call. Finally, the North has rebelled. They leave nothing but destruction in their path towards King's Landing. Robb Stark is a good man with a kind heart, but Northerners are unsatisfactory once they taste blood. Naruto nodded gravely. The condition of the Seven Kingdoms seems dire. But that doesn't explain why you're here. All eyes turned to Jiraiya, who sighed. The Grand Masters have come to a conclusion. The only way for this to end is for the Brotherhood to intervene. Naruto's eyes widened. The Brotherhood hasn't interfered with royalty for hundreds of years. Edward nodded. Yes, since Aegon the Conqueror. But desperate times call for desperate measures. Jiraiya nodded. Yes, and the Council has compiled a list of suitable rulers, but some involve playing the long game. Naruto looked at the three in confusion. So, who's on the list? Taiin almost facepalmed. Well, considering we're here, then maybe the Targaryen girl. Naruto's eyes widened. You want Daenerys on the throne? Edward shook his head. Nothing's official, and she's not the only candidate, but she's the one with the least experience. But their reports painted a shocking picture of the girl, so the council felt it was worth a try to give her a chance to redeem her family name. Taiin snorted. After your little display at the door, I'm not impressed. Naruto bit his lip to contain the sarcastic comment. Luckily, Edward intervened. I don't know if she looked passionate enough from where I was sitting. I think she's worth a Jiraiya. The old assassin stroked his beard in deep thought. The last time a Targaryen sat on the throne, it was a disaster. Most of the lords of Westeros won't be pleased to see the dragon ruling again, much less the Mad King's daughter. The room fell silent, and the Sannin sighed. I need to talk to the girl. It's the only way I'll feel comfortable with the decision I have to make. Naruto nodded. I can make dinner for us tonight. No, I must speak with her alone. She will receive no help from you. And while I speak with her, you can work with Masters Kenway and Sand on your training regimen. Mastery! The blonde man looked at his friend in surprise. You got promoted? Taiin gave her a cheeky smile. Of course I have. The real question is, why haven't you? I've been a little worried if you haven't noticed. Edward smiled. That's understandable, but that will no longer be the case. I'm going to resume your training with the help of Master Taiin and Lord Jiraiya, and you'll be a master in no time. Naruto nodded and Jiraiya spoke. Well then, if all official business is done, then let's begin our mission. Craster's fortress. Jon fell to the ground as Craster threw him into the room that housed the Night's Watch. Get out! Get out, everyone! The bastard has meddled where he shouldn't have! He kicked Jon in the stomach before turning to the Lord Commander. I want you and your men to leave. And you will arrange it. He handed him the long claw that Jon had dropped. Mormont took the sword and turned to Jon, who managed to get to his feet. Wait outside, Lord Commander. Now! Jon glanced at Craster before turning and leaving. He waited outside for a few minutes before Mormont was flanked by Minato. What did you do? Jon looked to Minato for help, but his face remained unreadable. I followed him. He took the baby into the woods, the newborn. Mormont shook his head. What business is it of yours? No, you don't understand. It's killing them, all the kids. The Lord Commander looked at Minato, who simply nodded. You know. You both know. Minato told me not long ago. But the wildlings serve crueler gods than you or I. Those boys are Craster's offerings. Offerings? He's murdering his own children. He's a monster. He takes his own daughters as wives. We've known this man was a monster for a long time, but more times than I can count. That monster has given me and dozens of rangers a warm bed and food in our stomachs. Sometimes extremes justify the means, Jon. Jon looked at Minato, not expecting him to defend Craster. We have other wars to fight. Like it or not, we need men like Craster. Jon looked at the Lord Commander and Minato in disbelief. He hadn't expected two of the most honorable people he knew to turn a blind eye to such actions. I saw it. Minato and Gior stared at Jon in shock. You saw what? I saw something take that child. Yes. Whatever it is, I dare say you'll see him again. Now get my horse ready. We'll leave at dawn. Gior handed Longclaw to Jon. Don't lose him again. Jon watched the two veteran rangers leave feeling defeated. When they were out of earshot, Minato spoke. The child is as honorable as his father. Yes, Lord Stark was an example to all the men of the North. But the boy is right. We condone this man's actions, and that makes us just as bad as he is. That old bastard will get what's coming to him someday. But that day isn't today. For now, he's still useful for the clock. Minato drew his cloak closer to his body and walked away to gather his things for the journey further north. King's Road. Sasuke halted his horse and saw a legion of Lannister soldiers. His eagle vision allowed him to see them surrounding a camp where only one man stood to fight them. The assassin dismounted and drew his bow and quiver of arrows. With his eagle-like vision, he saw a group of children huddled behind some bushes away from the rest of the group. It wasn't hard to guess that his two targets were in that group. While the Night's Watch fought off several Lannister men on his own, Sasuke knew he wouldn't last and acted quickly. He moved silently through the thick bushes, but before he could reach them, they charged into battle after seeing their protector fall. Bucking idiots! Sasuke quickly knocked an arrow and let it fly, striking a Lannister soldier in the eye as he tried to grab Arya. He rushed at Arya, but a soldier stepped in his way. The assassin ducked under a blow that would have taken his head off and slashed with his sword, the Valyrian steel slicing through the armor and spilling the man's guts onto the field. When he looked up, he saw Arya helping the men trapped in a burning carriage, soldiers closing in on her from behind. Hey! Arya and the soldiers turned just as Sasuke struck the first one with his bow, the blow knocking the man out and sending him flying a few feet. The second tried to grab him, but Sasuke simply spun around before launching himself into the air with his back foot and throwing his sword through the eye slit in the man's helmet. Before he could retrieve his sword, he had to lean back to avoid having his throat slashed. The soldier swung again, but this time Sasuke blocked it with a large hunting knife. The two were locked in a standoff for a few seconds, but with lightning speed, Sasuke yanked the blade free and spun before grabbing it with his other hand and connecting it with the man's heart. Whoa, how did you do that? Sasuke smiled. Years of practice. Are you Arya Stark now? The girl stammered, trying to find the words, and Sasuke nodded. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to save you and a boy named Gendry. Young Stark's eyes widened. He's there, help him. The killer turned and saw a teenager trying to hold off two soldiers on his own, but they had him backed against the wall with him wildly swinging a warhammer. Stay close. He didn't wait for her response as he took off at full speed. He collided with a soldier and smashed his head against the wall. Before the second could react, Sasuke kicked him in the balls, which enraged him and made him double over in pain before losing his mind. You're Gendry? The boy nodded. Come with me. Okay. The three took off, all the confusion of the battle serving as cover, but it only allowed them to reach the three's line before they were spotted. Once in the forest, Sasuke could sense the soldiers behind him, but thankfully both Arya and Gendry were in pretty good shape and were able to keep up with their current pace. The unfortunate boy who followed them wasn't so lucky. Wait for me, guys! Sasuke turns to see a fat boy trying to catch up to them, but what caught his attention were the Lannister men behind him. Keep running, Arya glared at him. We can't leave him. Unfortunately, I am not. Sasuke powered up and ran at full speed past the fat kid and straight toward the soldiers. One man raised his sword, but Sasuke cut off both of his arms before he could use it. Ah! Sasuke silenced their screams by removing his head. Two men quickly charged, but both attacks were blocked by Sasuke's sword. The assassin spun around and buried his sword in one of his knee pads and quickly took his weapon and impaled a man who tried to jump at him. He then took that man's sword and blocked another strike before burying it in a soldier's foot before punching him in the face. He quickly dodged another strike and removed his sword from the man's foot and kicked a charge, throwing him off his true target and impaling his own comrade before Sasuke stabbed him in the back of the head. Sasuke then turned around just in time to impale the last man with his sword as he threw the hilt into the ground with the man's body at the end of the blade. The killer closed his eyes as he stood in the midst of the destruction he had just caused. Lend me a little of your strength, brother. I'll return the favor if you ask. With his hands outstretched, Sasuke felt a strange but familiar energy enter his body, causing him to smile as he shot out at full speed after the children. Just before reaching the fat boy, he made a cross with his fingers. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Two Sasukes appeared and the original grabbed the fat boy while the two clones grabbed Arya and Gendry before jumping high into the trees with strength and speed neither of the kids had seen before. Thank you, Naruto. Karth. Naruto sat on the roof of Zoro's mansion smiling. No problem, brother. It didn't bother her that Sasuke was asking for her chakra because he had done it many times, but it made her wonder what she was getting into. Naruto, we need to talk. The young assassin turned to look at Tain and patted the spot next to him that she took. So what makes her so special, Tain? No! Don't say we're not having this conversation just because. Naruto looked over and saw tears streaming down her face. I gave myself to you and only you. All of me. I was just a toy. A bore. Never. Naruto stood up and pulled the Dornish women with him. I loved you. I still love you. Everything between us was real, Tyene sneered. But you still slept with the dragon. I can't explain it, Tyene, but I care for you just as much as I care for Daenerys. I can't explain it, and I know it's not fair, but that's how I feel. What about the Dothraki girl? I heard she's your wife. Naruto smiled. I have another conversation to have, but I care about Eri too. Not as much as you and Danny, but she's special. Tyene punched him in the arm. You think this is funny? You selfish man. You're selfish, Dash. Tyene stopped screaming and crushed her lips against his. She kissed him, her tongue barely grazing his, but he shuddered all the way to his toes. He started to lean toward her, to open his mouth wider, to steal the kiss he denied himself for too long, when suddenly he remembered. At the intrusive, unwelcome thought, he jerked his face away. I can't. Not with Danny without talking to her first. Naruto didn't wait for her answer, he simply got off the roof. Chapter 12. Naruto walked with Daenerys and a small group of Dothraki guards as they explored the market. He had foregone his assassin's robes, as the heat in Essos made them extremely uncomfortable. He opted to wear a simple pair of brown trousers tucked into dark brown boots. He also wore a loose-fitting shirt that left most of his tightly woven upper body exposed. Strapped to his hip was his trusty sword, and his leather bracers were tucked under the sleeves of his shirt. He could feel Daenerys' eyes on him, as well as the blush on his face whenever he saw her looking at him. As much as he would love to take her back to his chambers and grape her, the Dothraki healers had told them at this stage of her pregnancy that it wasn't good for the baby to be intimate like that. So, when will I meet Sir Jiraiya? Naruto laughed. That old pervert isn't a gentleman, but he's definitely better than most with a sword. And he actually wants to meet you too. Daenerys looked into his blue eyes. So you've got it? Yes, he and some other members of the Brotherhood are in town. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you to see them tonight. Daenerys smiled as she wrapped her arm around his and leaned into him. I'd love to. Naruto smiles as they continue walking through the stalls, seeing what they have to offer. Unlike when they were with the Dothraki, they were able to show their affection for each other in public. Holding hands, small kisses, things Naruto didn't realize he craved so much, and he could tell Daenerys enjoyed them too. They soon found themselves at a weapons stand, and Naruto lazily looked through the selection. A few knives caught his eye, but the rest were unremarkable. The Hidden City's forging was arguably the best in the world, and the blacksmith was always coming up with ideas for new weapons. During his last trip, he was lucky enough to try out a new bow they were designing, one made of metal. I want a sword. Daenerys' words brought him out of his thoughts as he looked at a selection of swords. His eyes scanned the selection of swords on display and he shook his head. None of these swords fit you well. Don't get me wrong, you've come a long way in your training, but all of these swords are too heavy ones for you to wield. I handle kuruma very well. Naruto smiled as his Targaryen anger began to show. Yes. Ser Yor told me you fought well against your brother. I was even more pleased that you let him draw his own weapon and fight you. It shows honor. But Viserys was weak. The enemies who will come are well trained. What will you do when the fight drags on and you can raise your barley sword? Daenerys sneered. So what do you suggest I do? Naruto kissed her head. Don't worry, love, I'll find you the perfect sword. I can think of some other skills for you to learn in the meantime. He looked at a set of throwing stars and smiled. After making his purchase, the two continued their walk. So what's the plan? Naruto shrugged. For now, there aren't any. My main goal is to keep you and our son safe. Once that's done, we can plan for the future. What about Westeros? What about her? Daenerys stopped in her tracks and forced Naruto to look into her eyes. The 7 kingdoms belong to my family. The Iron Throne is my birthright. So you have the same goals as your brother? I am not my brother. My brother would have made a terrible king. But I would make a wonderful and just queen. All my life I have run for the mistakes my ancestors made. But I will not break the wheel and return the Targaryen name to its former glory. Naruto smiled and pulled Daenerys into a searing kiss. She moaned as his hands found her hair and tugged at her golden locks. But before their kiss could lead to anything, Naruto did. Remember what you just said, Danny? I have no problem helping you reclaim the Iron Throne, But only if you don't get lost along the way. Naruto was in his chambers at Zoro's mansion, sharpening his weapons. He didn't trust the man one bit, so he always kept a sharp blade when he walked the halls of the man's home. He could also see the way he looked at Daenerys when he thought no one was looking. He couldn't blame him, though. Her flawless porcelain skin, her plump lips, her long, silver hair. It was almost impossible not to desire her, but Zoro made him uneasy, almost as if he wanted to claim her as his own, and it would be a cold day in the 7 hells before Naruto would allow that to happen. A knock at the door drew his attention, and with his eagle vision, he saw no threat before inviting them in. Daenerys' 3 handmaidens entered, carrying garments. "Khaleesi says she would like it if you use these my call." Naruto shook his head and smiled at Eri. "I'm not your call, Eri." Doria shook her head as she pushed him down into a chair and began playing with her hair in front of a mirror. "You sleep with the Khaleesi, and she carries your child. Not to mention you killed Drogo and all of his blood riders. You are the call of this Khalasar, just as Daenerys is the Khaleesi. Though your hair will be rather difficult to braid." She tried to pull her hair back, but it just bounced back in its normal spikes. "Doria, stop. Why did the Khaleesi send you here?" "He wants to make a good impression on Lord Jiraiya, and he also wants you to look your best. We only offered our assistance, my call. Well, I can dress myself. But while you're here, how's your homework going?" Doria smiled. "He's a tough cookie to crack. He's got all his secrets tucked tightly against his chest, but he'll crack. All men do once I've slept with them. Haven't you done it yet?" "No, my lord. He has resisted, but he will not hold out for much longer." Naruto nodded. "Well, keep me posted. You're fired. All of you." The maids turned to leave, but the assassin quickly remembered something. "Eri, can we talk?" Eri stayed and Doria gave her a wicked smile before leaving the room. "Yes, my call?" Naruto sighed. "Eri, I wanted to talk about Drogo giving me away the way he did. It wasn't fair that you could choose who you wanted to be with." Eri kept her eyes on the ground, but she could hear his soft words. "What if I still choose you? I'm with your Khaleesi. I enjoy your company, but it wouldn't be fair to you or Daenerys." Eri was silent for a moment before looking at him. She balled her hands into fists before lunging forward. Her lips were soft like dainties and equally insistent. She leaned into him, her mouth opening wider until they fused. He felt her thread a hand through his hair and pull her body closer. As quickly as it began, it ended. "You are Kal. Kal has many wives." With that, Naruto was left with a lot to think about. Not long after, Naruto dressed in the clothes Daenerys had chosen for him. He wore a pair of loose-fitting black pants tucked into black boots. He then wore a white shirt with black jewels sewn into the material. The clothes were perfect for the hot climate of Essos. The biggest change was his hair. Doria had found a gel to put in his hair to loosen it from its natural spikes. It was now in a simple braid, nothing complicated like the one Daenerys sported, but just as elegant. When he saw what she was wearing, his breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a white dress that left her back bare. She also wore a 3-headed dragon brooch she had found at the market. And, as usual, her silver hair was pulled back in an elaborate braid. If he looked closely enough, he could see through the fabric of her dress where she wasn't wearing any underwear. The smirk on her face said it all. Ever since the healers told them they couldn't be intimate the way they wanted, Daenerys would push his buttons. Wear the hexy clothes that were normal in Essos or allow him a quick glimpse every now and then. The worst were the times she squeezed his cock in public. Though they couldn't go all the way most nights, the new Kal found himself between his Khaleesi's legs, taking her to heights of ecstasy she didn't. Instead of meeting at the outpost, Jiraiya invited them to a party hosted by the Spice King. Apparently, Jiraiya was a wealthy merchant looking to bring his wares to Qarth, or at least that's what they thought. Daenerys Targaryen. "I must say I'm surprised to see you here. Especially since I didn't extend you an invitation." Naruto narrowed his eyes at the man and felt Daenerys' arm grip him tighter. "We were invited by Lord Jiraiya," the man sneered. "And how is it that you know someone like Lord Jiraiya?" "It's family." The Spice King finally allowed his eyes to rest on Naruto. "You came with his Khalasar, even though we thought you were a corpse. And who could you be?" Naruto smiled as he took a step toward the man. "I am Kal Naruto. I killed Khal Drogo and his blood riders and claimed his Khalasar as mine and Daenerys's. If you speak to him like that again, I will do the same to your house." The Spice King gulped as the Dothraki guards escorting them stepped forward, hands on their arak, ready to defend their Khal and Khaleesi. I don't think that's necessary. Lord Jiraiya hasn't arrived yet, but I welcome you to enjoy the party. Naruto gave her a kind smile as he led Daenerys past the man, her Dothraki guards watching him as they passed. I can't wait for this baby to be born. I want you to take me now. I'm sure we could find an empty room somewhere. Naruto smiled. Relax, my love. There's a saying that goes, good things come to those who wait. Danny leaned toward him to whisper in his ear. But what if I've been a bad girl? Naruto gulped as his pants grew tighter. Doria has taught you too much, the last Targaryen smiled. Doria has only taught me how to satisfy my king. Your body taught me the rest. The way you react to my dirty talk or that thing I do with my tongue that you love so much. Naruto turned beet red and quickly looked for a distraction. Let's try some food. Dani's eyes widened at the mention of food. She was eating for two. There's a large tiled area in the center of the room that serves as everything from a dance floor to a stage for performers coming and going, to another place to mingle with extravagantly dressed guests. But the real star of the evening is the food. Tables laden with delicacies line the walls. Everything you can think of and things you've never dreamed of are lurking. Whole roasted cows, pigs, and goats are still on fire. Huge trays of birds stuffed with savory fruits and nuts. Ocean creatures drizzled with sauces or begging to be dunked in spicy concoctions. Countless cheeses, breads, vegetables, sweets, cascades of wine, and streams of spirits flickering with flames. Daenerys licked her lips as she realized how hungry she was. I want to try everything in the room. Be my date? Daenerys smiled at Naruto, who just looked at her with a raised eyebrow, so she sighed to explain. Look, Naruto, we obviously don't know when Lord Jiraiya will make his appearance. So until he forces us to, let's enjoy our time together, like we have been. Naruto frowned before drinking the rest of his glass before taking her offered arm with a smile and left to enjoy the party. Do you think we should just try one bite of each dish? Daenerys suggested, though Naruto just shook his head. No, our resolve will probably break. So let's do whatever it takes. Naruto smiled and Daenerys nodded, finding the first dish that looked appealing on the first table, which had about 20 soups. When she came across a creamy pumpkin concoction sprinkled with sliced walnuts and small black seeds. I could eat this all night, but he doesn't, weakening with a light green broth that he can only describe as tasting like spring, and again when he tastes a foamy pink soup studded with raspberries. Naruto just tries everything she tries, though he skipped the raspberry since he didn't really care for berries besides strawberries. As the couple mingled and explored the party, primarily looking for food, faces appeared, names were exchanged, and kisses were brushed against each other's cheeks. Naruto and Daenerys make no effort to find company, instead constantly seeking them out. They're the one thing no one wants to miss at the party. Daenerys acted delighted, but had no interest in the people, as they were distractions from the food and the man on her arm. Each table presented new temptations, and she really couldn't help but try almost everything. Naruto made a note to get or cook her some of the dishes she really enjoyed very soon. Daenerys took a small roasted bird, bit into it, and her tongue was flooded with orange sauce. Delicious. She shared it with Naruto, smiling and laughing as she did so because she wanted to keep trying things, and the idea of throwing food away was completely stupid to her. Besides, she liked sharing her food with Naruto. He always made her laugh when she did, just like now. After about 10 tables, it was full, and they'd only tried a small number of the dishes available. Naruto wasn't stuffed or hungry yet, rather, he was content and fine with that. Looks like you two are enjoying the party. Naruto turned around to see Edward dressed in clothes similar to his. Edward, it's good to see you. Allow me to introduce you to Daenerys of House Targaryen. Edward took her hand and kissed it. It's a pleasure to meet you, my lady. Naruto's stories about your beauty don't do you justice. It's a pleasure to meet you too. And I guess I'll have to talk to Naruto later about the way he describes me. How do you two know each other? Naruto smiled. Edward is the captain of the Jackdaw, the legendary pirate ship, and a guild master. Danny nodded. It's a pleasure to finally meet a member of the Brotherhood who isn't Naruto. Edward smiled. Well, if things go well tonight, you'll be seeing a lot more of us. Enjoy the rest of the festivities, you two. Edward turned to leave but stopped. Oh, and Naruto, when Daenerys goes to speak with Lord Jiraiya, you can find Tyene and me at the perch. He said nothing more as he walked away. What did he mean by that? Naruto could only smile. Don't worry about that, your pretty little head. Focus on your homework tonight, and then we can worry about other things. She kissed the top of his head, and the two sampled their food again before heading to the dance floor. Daenerys rested her head on Naruto's shoulder as they swayed to the slow, melodic music. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Dothraki guards watching him and Daenerys. Daenerys followed their eyes and smiled. What do you think of being called their call? The assassin shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. I know their culture is to follow strength, but to be shown this much respect in such a short time is a bit overwhelming. We'll need their loyalty for what comes next. They won't last in a siege, but in the open, the Dothraki are some of the finest assassins in the world. Is this how you plan to take the Iron Throne? What about breaking the wheel? Daenerys glared at the assassin. The words of my house are fire and blood. Yes, but you're different. For many years your family ruled through fear, and look where that got them. You're the last Targaryen. Find a better way. Daenerys left her thinking about Naruto's words, but the assassin lifted her chin to look him in the eyes. I'm not naive, Dany. You know I'm a murderer, and I know how wars are won, but remember who your enemies are. There's no need for senseless violence. Daenerys nodded and pulled him in for a kiss. Their tongues battled, but before they could go any further, Naruto felt a touch on his shoulder. Do you mind if I get in? Naruto smirked as Jiraiya stood in front of him. No, not at all. Dany, this is Lord Jiraiya. Jiraiya, dressed in his normal robes, bowed exaggeratedly to Daenerys. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, my lady. You're just as beautiful as Naruto described. I can see why he named you after a boy. Naruto quickly kneed his mentor in the stomach. You can't go around saying things like that. The young Khaleesi could only laugh at the interaction between the two. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, my lord. Naruto has spoken highly of you. The old assassin smiled as he held his stomach. Of course he did. Before their conversation could progress, the Spice King intervened. Lord Jiraiya, I'm glad to finally see you once again. There's no need for you to mess with the likes of this group. Why don't we go to Solar Power and discuss our future trade? Daenerys looked at the man, and before Naruto could say anything, Jiraiya interrupted him. I believe Naruto has already told you he is family here at my invitation, and I do not appreciate the way you have treated these two. There will be no need for you and I to go anywhere together, but I do need your solar. Come, Lady Targaryen, we have much to discuss. He extended his arm and Daenerys took it, giving Naruto one last look where he gave her a smile which she returned before she turned to the Spice King. It was a lovely party, good food. He patted the nervous man on the shoulder before collecting his coat and sword from the Dothraki guards before heading to the perch, which was the highest point in the city. Not long after, he found himself atop the city wall overlooking the city. He stood there in silence for a few minutes before he felt a presence behind him. He ducked just in time to avoid a throwing star and had to use his hidden blade to deflect another. He only caught a glimpse of Tyene before having to dodge another sword thrown in his direction. The two danced atop the wall for a few moments, but Naruto knew she was working to close the distance between them. When the master assassin came within striking range, she attempted to plunge her dagger into his chest, but Naruto grabbed her wrist and pulled her towards him, smashing his forehead against hers. He didn't have time for another attack as he quickly had to dodge a blow from Edward and his Valyrian steel cutlass. Edward's attacks were faster and had more power than Tyene's, leaving Naruto no time to draw Kurama, so he spun around at the pirate assassin and caught the sword. Edward's eyes widened, and he couldn't avoid the punch Naruto threw at his face. Edward stood and rubbed his jaw as Tyene stood beside him. The two masters shared a look before charging, Tyene with her daggers and Edward with his cutlass. But before they could clash, an explosion rocked the entire city. The three assassins watched in confusion as the smoke drifted towards the center of the city. Naruto's eyes reddened as he realized where the smoke was coming from, and he disappeared in a burst of speed, Tyene and Edward not far behind. When he arrived at the Spice King's mansion, it was half destroyed, and Naruto saw Jiraiya lying in the rubble. Tyene and Edward quickly came to his aid while Naruto scanned the area. As Jiraiya sat down, Naruto leaped toward him. Where is she? The Sannin looked into the red, narrowed eyes of his pupil and felt a little afraid. I'm sorry, Naruto. I couldn't stop them. They took me by surprise. Tyene and Edward looked at the old assassin in confusion, wondering who could get a Sannin as Naruto's anger only grew. Who? Jiraiya grimaced at the sheer anger in Naruto's voice, but knew he couldn't hide information from him. The sorcerers. They took her away and said it was time for fire and flesh to be born into the world. Naruto again planned to head to the tower where he knew the witches resided, but Jiraiya. Naruto, I know you don't have the right mindset, but you can't just go and level that place. His student just growled and went towards his prey. Chapter 13. 1,000 followers. Daenerys' vision. Daenerys woke up and held her stomach, which was in extreme pain. She'd experienced a few contractions over the past 2 weeks, but this one was worse than any before. The Khaleesi managed to stand and began walking. The pain in her abdomen worsened, and she began to fear for her son's safety. She only made it a few feet before collapsing to the ground with a blood-curdling scream. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't in the same hallway as before. Whatever building she was in ruins. Snow covered everything, and a strong, burning smell filled her nostrils. The young Khaleesi turned around, trying to figure out where she was, and her eyes fell on something she'd only seen in books. The Iron Throne. The last Targaryen held her breath as she approached the throne where her family had sat for years. Her hand slowly reached out to touch the throne, but the sound of a crying baby steadied her. The crying grew louder, and her heart clenched as she retreated from the throne to find the source, leaving the destroyed throne room. Real world. The 3 master assassins raced toward the Tower of the Eternals, with Naruto far ahead of them. Jiraiya himself was furious that he had allowed those bald bastards to let him down. His spies had been hearing whispers about the warlocks, but they could never get close enough to confirm anything. All he knew was that they were planning something big, and it looked like they were finally making their plan happen. So who's the boss of the plan? The Sannin glared at the foolish assassin. We'll take down that tower brick by brick, though Naruto could do it himself. But we'll provide backup if he needs it. So you get your ass kicked and we become reinforcements? It took all of Jiraiya's strength not to scream at the young assassin. You've never seen Naruto like this before. We'll only get in his way. There's only one person I'd recommend going into battle with the deranged Naruto, and Master Edward left him in King's Landing. Taiyin nodded reluctantly as the pirate assassin expressed concern. Is it wise to unleash Naruto like this? The old assassin turned to the pirate. Why do you ask? It's no secret that Naruto's power is tied to his anger. The angrier he gets, the stronger he becomes. I know you've been working with him to try and channel his strength through other means, but it doesn't seem to have worked. Sending Naruto out now would be catastrophic. He won't hold back. We don't know how much damage he'll truly do. Jiraiya seemed to ponder this, but Taiyin looked at Edward. I understand that you're this legendary pirate assassin and I respect you, but you don't know Naruto like I do. Taiyin stared ahead, at the barely visible form of the man she longed for. All his life, Naruto has been fighting that anger. Isolated in a world he does his best to protect. You think he wants to be called the demon child? Edward remained silent, but Taiyin continued to defend her friend. He's busted his ass every day of his life to prove to everyone that he's not what they think he is. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's what he's given to help the people who keep being ungrateful to him. The women he loves, who's also pregnant with his child, were kidnapped. He has every right to be angry. And I don't care that his chakra is darker than ours, he's never used it for anything but the good of the Brotherhood. Naruto Uzumaki is the bravest and strongest man I know, so you better think twice before you try to disrespect him in my presence. Edward remained silent and Jiraiya just smiled as they continued towards the tower. In front of them, Naruto's red eyes landed on the tower, and his hand balled into a fist. Before he could make contact with the tower, he saw a flash of metal out of the corner of his eye and had to jump back. When the dust cleared, 2 figures stood in front of the blonde assassin. The shorter one wore a mask to cover his facial features, as the mask was white with curved eye holes and a red wavy design in place of a mouth, while his long brown hair was curled into a bun as 2 strands framed both sides of his face. They wore a sleeveless light green tunic with matching skirt-like pants, as the belt was adorned with several weapon needles. The tallest was pale with a strong, muscular build, short, spiky hair, brown eyes, and small eyebrows, while bandages formed a mask around his mouth. He wore a sleeveless tunic of dark brown bordering black with chainmail underneath, protecting his chest, with loose-fitting trousers. On his back, he carried a massive broadsword that had 2 holes cut into the blade, one near the tip and a semicircular one near the hilt. However, the detail that alarmed him most was their left hands. They were missing their left index finger. It was once a rite of passage for assassins who completed their training and earned the right to wield a hidden blade long ago. It was to show the assassin's dedication to the order, but as time passed, so did the hidden blade. Now it was a mark of traitors and rogues who destroyed their hidden blades to sever their connections to the Brotherhood. Master assassins typically kill traitors almost immediately once their treachery becomes known. If these two are still alive, that means their skills are impeccable. The masked man wasted no time throwing a needle at Naruto, but he deflected it with a three-pronged kunai. The figure surprised Naruto with a burst of speed as they appeared in front of him with a dagger drawn, but he was quick to raise his own sword to block it. The two blades locked for a moment, and Naruto's narrowed eyes stared at a hole in the mask before he dropped his kunai and spun, landing a powerful spinning back fist to destroy the mask. But his eyes widened in shock as the figure's entire body shattered into ice. He snarled when he saw the masked figure standing next to the man with the sword once again. Zabuza is fast. We expected nothing less from the son of the Flash, but something about him doesn't seem right. The larger man removed his sword and nodded. Thanks, Haku. Now go entertain your friends. Haku disappeared and Zabuza quickly closed the distance between them. Naruto barely had time to raise Kurama to block the attack. The Valerian steel resisted against the giant sword. Gods, this guy is strong. Naruto growled as he pushed Zabuza back and attempted to decapitate him. But the man's great sword saved him, and before the young assassin could react, the man's foot slammed into his face and sent him back a few feet. Come on, kid, you'll have to do better than that if you want to save your girl. Just like that, something inside Naruto snapped, and Zabuza was blinded by a flash of red before he felt a hand around his neck and his body slammed into the tower wall. For the first time in his life, the red assassin felt true fear as he stared into the eyes of a demon. Inner tower. When Daenerys left the throne room, she entered a hallway. The last one was dark and bleak. This one was bright and lively. The walls were decorated with banners displaying her family's sigil, alternating with another banner bearing a simple red spiral. People walked past her and bowed as they called her, Your Grace. She didn't have time to respond before she was attacked by two blurs, and her eyes widened when she saw the two. The first was a boy with blonde hair and violet eyes, while the girl had silver hair and blue eyes. Mom, come on! Dad said we can't open our presents until you get here. The girl nodded as enthusiastically as her apparent brother. The two dragged her into a room where she found Naruto standing over a crib, cradling a small blonde baby. Dad, we found Mom! The girl clung to her father's leg as the boy ran toward the two boxes on the bed. Minato, I told you about jumping on the bed. The boy sank down onto the bed and smiled like his father. Sorry, Dad. Daenerys stared in shock as Naruto placed the girl on his shoulders and spun around. A fit of giggles erupted from her daughter before Naruto turned to her. Come on, Danny, I'm sure the twins are dying to open their presents. A smile slowly appeared on her face as her heart filled with joy when Naruto turned around and looked at her. What do you think, love? Do the twins deserve their gifts? She could only smile as she joined her family in bed, and Naruto took out a small scroll which he handed to the girl. To my daughter Visenya, I gift her the technique that made her mother famous on the battlefield. It took her a while to master, but I'm sure she'll have no problem mastering it with our help. The little girl buried herself in a hug with her mother. Thanks, Mom! I'm going to be a warrior like you and Dad. Hey, I want to be a warrior! Minato looked at Visenya and Daenerys smiled as Naruto reached behind her back. And you'll do it with my son using the same technique that made your grandfather and me famous. He pulled out a three-pronged kunai and Minato's eyes widened as he snatched the sword from his father. This is one of the most difficult techniques ever created, and it will take you a long time to learn, but I believe in you, my son. Minato smiled at his father before he and his sister ran out of the room, shouting who would master their technique first. Once the children were gone, Naruto placed his forehead against Dani's. You know you'll have to wake up soon. Daenerys nodded, tears streaming down her face. Just a little longer. Naruto could only nod as the two sat in silence. Outside the tower, Zabuza was completely overwhelmed by Naruto, who seemed to abandon all strategy and attacked like an animal. The rogue assassin was unprepared when Naruto took his sword and split it in half with his bare hands. What are you going to do? Naruto simply roared and threw half of the ruined sword at him, which Zabuza jumped over before going through some hand seals. Water release! Water dragon bullet! Before Naruto could react, a dragon-shaped wave of water crashed into him. Zabuza breathed a sigh of relief, but it was short-lived as Naruto leaped out of the wave and tried to decapitate him with the other half of the broken sword. The red assassin barely moved out of the way, jumping back to try to put as much distance between himself and Naruto as possible. "What is this boy?" He received an answering roar as Naruto charged again, this time faster than before. He felt pain in his ribs as Naruto delivered a crushing kick to his side. He then spun around and delivered a powerful kick to the back that sent Zabuza crashing into the tower. The man found himself unable to move and watched as Naruto thrust out his palm and red chakra began to swirl around it. The blusher could only watch in fear as Naruto charged. Demonic style, burning Rasengan! The attack pierced Zabuza so much that he couldn't even scream. His body couldn't even register the pain as a gaping hole burned in his stomach as his body pierced through the tower wall. His red eyes stared at the dead Rouge before looking at the sorcerers coming to defend his tower. A dark, sinister smile made its way onto Naruto's face. No more hiding! A dark red aura surrounded Naruto as he charged. It wasn't long before the hallway walls were painted red as the assassin used his nail-like claws to tear the warlocks to pieces. They threw spells at him, but his shroud simply burned through it. One tried to run, but Naruto ripped off his spin. He went to attack another but vanished, everyone vanished, and the massive hole in the wall disappeared as well. "It's time!" Naruto heard a scream from the end of the hallway and roared as he recognized Daenerys' voice. "There's no need for that anymore." The man held out his hand and Naruto felt all his chakra fade away and he returned to his normal state. "What have you done to me?" The man looked at him and shook his head. "So much power, but you're unwilling to wield it. You have yet to awaken the warrior within you." Another scream ripped through the tower, and Naruto wasted no time rushing past the warlock. When he reached the next room, what he saw shocked him. Daenerys sat on a bed of blankets, holding a crying baby in each arm. Her dragon eggs lay behind her. Naruto felt tears welling up in his eyes as he ran toward her. "A boy and a girl. A healthy and beautiful boy and girl." The killer sobbed as he saw the faces of his newborn children. The boy had blonde hair, while the girl had silver. He noted the features that resembled his own and those that resembled hers. "You've given us a lot of trouble today." Naruto turned around and saw several warlocks entering the room. He felt a familiar burning sensation as some of the strange chakra entered his system. "The mystery behind your people's abilities is unknown, and we have studied your people for years wondering how we could level the playing field, but our magic died years ago. Until Daenerys Targaryen came to our city with her dragon eggs, then our magic pulsed and we wondered what would happen if dragons breathed. Our magic would be heightened, but you came here and showed us that we know nothing about your people." Daenerys brought the children closer and Naruto could feel her power slowly increasing. "What does this have to do with us?" The warlock smirked as shackles appeared around his wrist, and clones of the warlock appeared and pulled on the chains to keep him in the center of the room. "Only death can pay for life. And we have 3 sacrifices for 3 dragons who will stay here with their mother until the end of time." Naruto's eyes widened as he realized what they meant and Daenerys let out a sob. "You will not touch my children, and I will not stay here. My home is across the sea, my people are waiting for me. They'll be waiting a long time." Several cauldrons burst into flames and Daenerys screamed, but Naruto remained calm, remembering his training with Jiraiya. Flashback. "Chakra flows through our bodies like our blood, but through its own network. It takes time and practice to learn to control it." Jiraiya sat cross-legged in front of Naruto, who was sitting the same way. Both had their eyes closed. "But you have something else, Naruto. Hidden beneath the surface, waiting to boil over and take control of you. But I hope together we can find a way to control it." "How will we do that, Lord Jiraiya?" "Honestly, I don't know. But I think so. Deep down, you hold the key to reigning in this power." Naruto nodded and continued meditating. He remained in the darkness for what seemed like hours until he was no longer in the darkness. He was now at the entrance to a cave. Something pulled at him, and he walked through the cave until he stood in front of a massive cage. The bars were the thickest metal he had ever seen, but it was what was in the cage that scared him. He couldn't see it clearly, but he could tell it was massive. He had read the stories about Balerion the Black Dread, but this beast certainly outshone him. "You're not ready yet." Naruto took a step back as he glimpsed the teeth that were taller than him. "What are you going to do?" "That doesn't matter right now because you're not ready." "Ready for what?" The creature opened its eyes and instead of anger, Naruto saw boredom. "You're still weak. Go away." The creature roared and Naruto opened his eyes to see Jiraiya still sitting in front of him unaware of what had just happened. End flashback. Naruto opened his eyes and found himself in front of the door once again. You're stronger than the last time you were here. But you're not ready yet. Naruto walked forward until he stood at the front of the cage. My family is in danger. Now I don't know if you're something my mind conjured up to help me understand my power, but I don't care. I need to save my family. The beast let out a deep laugh and stood up, and it took all of Naruto's strength not to cower in fear. The beast was actually a nine-tailed fox. The fox was over 15 meters tall, and its tails looked like they might fall off and attack the cage. I can assure you, I am very real. I will lend you my power, but don't think of it as destruction and anger, think of it as strength. Naruto felt the familiar energy surge through him, but unlike before, where it was forced upon him, this time he accepted it as he opened his eyes and pulled at the chains holding him. The warlocks holding the chains were thrown into pillars as Naruto looked around the room with his red eyes. Only death can pay for life, eh? Let's see that. Naruto grabbed one of the flaming cauldrons in a group before turning to the leader. Looks like you're finally accepting your role. Naruto snarled before grabbing the man by the throat and lifting him off the ground. He readied his other hand to pierce his heart, but Daenerys stopped him. Naruto, wait! The killer stopped his hand inches away and turned to face her, still wrapped in blankets. Take the kids, I'll take care of this. Now is not the time. Naruto, please trust me. Naruto stood for a few moments before releasing the warlock, but before he could run, Naruto stopped him. Demonic art held chains. Several chains of red smoke rose from the ground and enveloped the witch. The chains made a hissing sound, and the man screamed in pain, causing Naruto to smile slightly as he grabbed the children. Are you sure about this? Daenerys nodded but looked at him a little surprised at having never seen him like this before. Outside the tower. The rest of the assassins were outside the tower with Seriora and the rest of the Khalasar who had arrived after hearing the commotion and hearing that their Khaleesi was missing. Jiraiya had tried a few techniques but couldn't get in, so they had to wait and hope Naruto could handle it on his own. Do you think they're okay? Jiraiya nodded to Seriora. I've worked with Naruto for years, and he never gives up, especially when someone he cares about is in trouble. He'll go to the ends of the earth to save Daenerys. Yora nodded and Edward spoke up. So you never told us, Lord Jiraiya. Are we backing the girl up or what? Before Jiraiya could speak, a wave of red energy surged through the tower, and Naruto emerged. His body was protected by red chakra, and he was carrying two children in his arms. The Sannin looked at his student in shock as he handed the babies to Eri and Doria. Do you control it? Where is the Khaleesi? Naruto ignored both Yora and Jiraiya and retreated towards the tower. Everyone should take a step back. Yora went to go towards him, but Jiraiya stopped him when he felt his chakra increasing. Demon art, fire curtain. Everyone watched in shock as a massive ring of fire formed above the tower. It spun rapidly for a few moments, and only Jiraiya seemed to notice that Naruto was controlling it, restraining it. But reluctantly, the assassin released the technique. Fall. Fire fell from the sky like a cascade of flames directly onto the tower. Everyone ran as far away as they could, but Naruto stood directly in front of the flames rooted in place, his chakra cloak protecting him from the flames. The inferno raged for several minutes, and it was impossible to see through the flames, but it didn't take a genius to know that nothing would remain when they finally died down. And after what seemed like an eternity, the flames vanished as if they had never been there, and the tower was gone. Reduced to ash, all that remained was Daenerys Targaryen's unburned body, but that wasn't the surprising part. The reptile-like creatures sat on her shoulders. Impossible. Around him, Dothraki fell to their knees as Naruto wrapped his cloak around Daenerys, his dark features fading. My lord, how is this possible? Jiraiya could only stare in shock as the black and red dragon spread its wings and let out a screech. Outside the city, several figures stood on a cliff overlooking the city. The witches failed. No, they did their job. Now we've seen a glimpse of their true power. I wouldn't rule out witches just yet either. They have a few tricks up their sleeves. You are all my lord. Are you not satisfied with the results? It doesn't matter. All that matters is that in the end, Naruto Uzumaki will meet pain. Chapter 14. Jon pulled the cloak closer around himself as the harsh winds of the true north blew against him. His punishment for his actions at Craster's was an increase in watch duty, and each night he wondered why he was being punished when Craster was the real monster. Do you mind if I join you, Lord Snow? Jon remained silent as Minato sat beside him and stared at the dying fire, watching in amazement as the man made a few movements with his hands before a small stream of fire shot out of his mouth, keeping the flame alive. "Tell me, Lord Snow, how does Ned Stark's son end up in the Night's Watch?" "Bastard son," Minato nodded. "Even so, this is no place for the son of the Guardian of the North," I insisted. "There was nothing for me in Winterfell. It was my home, but you felt like you didn't belong." Jon looked down, remembering his life before joining the guard. "I was the bastard of a lord who was raised alongside his true-born children, born in a castle. I had it better than most. That doesn't mean it's been easy. No, but it wasn't all bad either. I had good relations with Robb, Arya, Bran. Rickon was still little, but sometimes he brought me things to read to him, and he loved watching us train in the yard." He gathered the furs, remembering his life before Robert came and everything went to shit. "But Lady Catelyn, she hated me. That was something I knew since Robb was my brother. I knew she wasn't my mother, and that she hated me like no one else." He shook his head, despising how she still made him feel, the same boiling sense of shame that washed over him every time her cold blue eyes fell upon him. "If Robb and I were fighting in the courtyard, and she showed up to watch, I knew I couldn't beat him or I'd pay the price. I couldn't beat him at anything if she was around. I got sick when I was little, and when I woke up she was at my bedside, and for a few days she was almost kind to me, and then my father came to sit with me and any caring I'd found vanished." "Did he ever hit you?" "She never hit me. She never touched me. It was almost as if she thought if I did I would taint her. I easily understood that I was unwanted, and she did her best to make her children feel that way too. Comments about how they could have had more if I wasn't around and things like that. Robb always apologized later, not wanting to offend his mother. Sansa ignored me most of the time, but then she was always under her skirt, doing her best. She did. Arya would openly defend me until she was blue in the face, and she would do it no matter how many times I told her not to bother. Bran and Rickon were too young to really understand. Lord Stark did nothing to stop her. He tried to protect me, I think. He raised me like he raised Robb, but she was careful not to do anything in front of him." She let out a deep sigh. "However, he never spoke to me about my mother. He didn't even let me ask most of the time. The last thing he said to me was, 'When I see you again, we'll talk about your mother.'" Jon wiped his eyes as he remembered hearing the news of his father's death. How he wanted to take Joffrey's own head and serve it to his cold hitch of a mother on a spike. "My father was a good man. Honorable. And I was the only blight on his honor." Minato watched as Jon wiped away the tears that were beginning to fall from his eyes. "What of you, my lord? Why would a man of your talents serve the Watch?" Minato smiled. "I don't. I serve a different order. Am I confused? I am not a member of the Night's Watch, but I needed to travel beyond the wall, so I offer the Watch my skills in exchange." Jon stared at the man in shock. "What could you possibly want here?" Minato laughed. "I like you, Jon Snow, but not enough to tell you all my secrets, at least not yet. But I will tell you this. There are terrible things here, as you have seen. This journey will not only affect the Seven Kingdoms, it will affect all of them. So we will all have to make difficult choices, do things we will not be proud of. So my advice to you, Jon Snow, is to kill the boy and let the man be born." Jon remained silent as Minato spun his sword. King's Road. Sasuke suppressed a growl as the Stark girl continued to pester him with questions. The past few days of travel had been exhausting, but his training kept him on his toes, and he wasn't about to slow down. "That's it. I'm not moving until you tell us where you're taking us." Gendry and Hotbai looked at Arya in shock, and then both boys gulped when Sasuke turned around and looked at the girl. "I went to a lot of trouble to save your ungrateful ass, so I'd appreciate it if you'd stop announcing our location to everyone. I need you quite a bit when we sneak past the Lannister army." Hotbai gulped. "The Lannister army? Why did we sneak past them?" "Because it's the only way to reach the Northern Army and your brother. The Lions are holding out at Harrenhal now, but they're certainly occupying the roads near the fortress, so I need you all to be quiet and listen to my orders." "I'm clear." Everyone nodded, and Sasuke nodded as they continued their journey north. "Who taught you how to fight?" Sasuke didn't even look at Arya as he continued walking. "I've had many teachers. I had a master. But the Lannisters killed him. I don't remember asking. Can you teach me?" Sasuke stopped again and fought the urge to gag the girl. "Didn't I tell you to stay calm?" The Stark girl looked at him defiantly, and reminded him of Naruto. "I won't be completely ready until you agree to teach me, And if not, you'd better be ready to kill every Lannister between here and the twins. Sasuke looked at Gendry and Hot Pie, who were in shock before speaking. Why do you want me to teach you? What will you gain? I want to kill Joffrey. And Cersei. And the Hound. And the Mountain. And I dash, so revenge. Arya nodded and the resemblance shifted from Naruto to himself. No, he turned and started walking. Before Arya could protest, he spoke again. Speak again and I'll gag and tie you up. I have no problem taking you to your brother. Arya grumbled but didn't speak as they continued their journey. Karth. Naruto felt the muscles in his arms almost weaken, but he simply refused to give up. You can give up whenever you want, Naruto. He could hear the amusement in Taiin's voice, but he smothered it and continued with his task. They were at the docks, and Naruto was using one arm to support himself on a wooden stake in the water. He'd been there for almost an hour and had switched hands several times, but he could feel his strength leaving him as his body sank further. Come on, this isn't even the hardest of the training. Surely the great Call Naruto can accomplish this feat. Naruto gritted his teeth at the mocking tone in Edward's voice and placed one hand over the other and pushed his body back to full extension, and his blood riders alongside the two master assassins cheered for their call, but Naruto knew it was a last-ditch effort. They were barely a week away from their battle at the home of the Undying, and his body wasn't used to the foreign chakra, so it always put a great strain on his body. The assassin felt his arms go limp as all strength left him and he plummeted into the waters below. Before he submerged, the water rose and caught him before washing him onto the docks next to Edward, who held out his hand. Thanks for the help. I don't think I could have swum. No problem. You did well considering you're not at full strength. Lord Jiraiya said it would take some time, so I was surprised you wanted to resume your training so quickly. Naruto remembered the tower and how helpless he felt until he tapped into its hidden power. I never had a family, but now that I'm doing nothing, it's going to hurt them. Edward nodded. Well, there isn't much we can do today. I have to go check on my team, but you're free for the day. Go spend time with your family. Naruto smiled as Edward walked away and Taiin walked up to him. The two walked toward Zoro's mansion in relative silence. Just outside the mansion doors, Naruto stopped his friend. Taiin, I wanted to apologize. If it seemed like I was misleading you in any way, then I'm truly sorry. You've always been open with me, but now I feel like there's a wall between us. Taiin was silent for a moment and Naruto thought she was going to lash out, but she didn't. Do you love her? Naruto nodded immediately, and Taiin smiled. Then that's that. I see the way you look at her, and you've never looked at me that way. Besides, we never discussed what was going on between us, so you have no obligation to explain anything to me. Naruto looked at his friend with sad eyes. Despite his words, he could still see the pain on his face. I'm so sorry, Taiin. You're one of my closest friends, and I hurt you in one of the worst ways possible, and I'll spend the rest of my days trying to make it up to you. Taiin gave him a forced smile and a nod before entering the mansion and disappearing. The assassin ran a hand through his hair before heading toward his and Daenerys' shared chambers. As he entered the room, he smiled at the sight before him. Daenerys lay in bed surrounded by pillows and blankets with her daughter breastfeeding. Her hair was loose, and the smile on her face made her look like a goddess in his eyes. At the end of the bed, Eri was burping her son, indicating that he had finished eating not long ago. In the corner, Doria was feeding the dragons small pieces of meat. Naruto wouldn't say it out loud, but the small creatures unsettled him. They were small, but when they grew up, they would be the most feared creatures in the world. As the thought of adult dragons crossed his mind, he heard a deep, rumbling sound, almost like a chuckle, but no one else seemed to notice. Love, come here. He looked into Daenerys' eyes and saw the tiredness, and quickly took his daughter from her arms. He knew Daenerys was excited to be a mother, but neither of them was ready for twins. He had offered to find a wet nurse to take a burden off Daenerys, but so far she had refused. Have you thought of a name yet? Naruto smiled and nodded. They had agreed that he would name his daughter, and she would name his son. He had spent the last few days thinking about names before settling on one he thought was perfect. Visenya. To honor her Targaryen heritage, Daenerys smiled as she motioned for Eri to hand her son over. I thought about naming him Rhaegar, after the brother I never knew, but then I remembered your stories. You never knew your father, but you know every heroic deed he's done, every battle he's fought. All I have of my father are the constant reminders of the sins he committed. I would be honored if you would allow me to name our son Minato, after his father. Naruto felt tears falling from his face as he kissed her forehead. Visenya and Minato of House Targaryen and the Uzumaki clan, King's Road. Arya Stark woke with a start when Sasuke gently kicked her. The sun had set and they had camped for the night, but Sasuke never seemed to sleep or tire of what the young Stark girl had to say. She joined him by the fire and waited for him to speak while he stared into the flames. When I was a child, probably younger than you, my entire clan was killed in a single night. Arya looked at him in confusion. In the past few days, the man hadn't offered her or her friends any personal information about himself. The only reason they followed him was because he was good at killing Lannisters. Who did it? Sasuke took a deep breath before speaking. My older brother. He killed every man, woman, and child, including our parents. After that, I dedicated my life to killing him. I severed personal ties for the sake of becoming strong enough to fight and kill him one day. I did many things I'm not proud of in this quest. Arya swallowed. You killed him? Sasuke nodded gravely. Sadly, yes. But the reason I'm telling you this is because I've followed the path you're starting down, and it doesn't end well. It brings me nothing but pain. I have no family and barely any friends. I don't know you well, Arya Stark, but I know you're not me. You have family and friends in the north. I don't want to go back to north, at least not as the same girl I was before. Sasuke nodded. How would you like to go back? As a warrior ready to defend her family and the north, to defend or to avenge? There's a big difference. Arya looked through the flames, her red eyes. Defend yourself. My father is dead, and Rob is marching south. Bran is in charge of Winterfell, but he's a child. I want to defend him and Rickon. Protect them from the terrors of this world. Sasuke smiled, and a wind blew between them, extinguishing the fire. Thanks to her training with Sirio, Arya was able to catch the needle as he threw it toward her. Your first task in your training will be to strike me. With the fire out, she could barely make out its shape, but its red eyes burned brightly. She gripped the needle in her hand and adopted a stance she'd practiced extensively over the past few months before missing her target, bringing a smirk to Sasuke's face. Karth. Naruto stood by the window and watched as everyone filtered into his and Daenerys' bedrooms. Daenerys was still confined to her bed, but Jiraiya wanted to call a meeting to announce their next steps. When everyone was settled, the Sannin began. I know these past few days have been hectic, but I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to let you all know that I will be supporting Daenerys' claim to the Iron Throne. I know you're not ready to travel alone just yet, but I'd like to start planning as soon as possible. Daenerys smiled, but Edward took a step forward. What does that entitle you to, my lord? Our order doesn't have the numbers to wipe out the Lannister army, or will we simply eliminate the king? Jiraiya shook his head. None. We will not make any decisions for you, my lady, only offer advice. Our knowledge and skills will be at your disposal, but you will not have an army of assassins at your beck and call. This is your chance to show the world that you are not your father, to prove to them that you are better than the rulers they have now. Thank you for the kind words, but if your order won't fight for me, who will? Jiraiya nodded. The Unsullied. They are one of the most feared armies in the world, army of slaves. Daenerys looked at Naruto, who was giving Jiraiya a puzzled look. Do you expect Daenerys to command an army of slaves? A group of swords for sale would be better, Jiraiya sneered. Selling swords, loyalty can be bought. The Unsullied are the most loyal group of warriors you'll ever meet. And why not show them a better way, my lady? Change what they know, make them fight for you because they don't want to because you bought them. Daenerys nodded while Naruto looked uncomfortable. There is another matter to discuss. Edward stepped forward once more. You can amass one of the largest armies ever seen, but we all know your greatest advantages will be the creatures you hatched. They are not creatures, my lord, they are my children as much as Visenya and Minato. Everyone except Naruto and Jiraiya looked at her in shock after her outburst, but Naruto caught the smile on his teacher's face at the mention of his father's name. I apologize, my lady. I was simply trying to remind everyone here that dragons haven't been seen in years. We don't know how big they'll get or if you can control them. I am the blood of old Valeria. My dragons will not harm me. Yes, but what about the others? Daenerys looked at Tyene, but the young assassin continued speaking. Master Edward brings up a good point. If you can't control your dragons, then they're not used to us. The last Targaryen went to argue, but Jiraiya stopped her. We are here to advise you, my lady. Please allow us to do so. Daenerys reined in her anger before nodding. What do you suggest, Master Edward? Dragons haven't roamed the earth in many years, but there must be much to know about caring for and training them in Westeros. I'd like to suggest that my team and I travel to Westeros and work to uncover any information we can. Daenerys looked at Jiraiya, who remained silent, waiting to hear her opinion on the matter. She glanced at Naruto, who was also silent. Lord Jiraiya, Naruto told me that you lead quite a bit of the spy network. That's true. Well, then I see no need for you to leave Master Edward, especially considering you have our only ship. Lord Jiraiya, please say that we are looking for anything that might help us raise my 3 children. Jiraiya smiled. Good decision, my lady. I also believe our business is concluded today. The others left the room, but Tain stopped them. Wait, there's one last thing to address. Daenerys narrowed her eyes at the Dornish assassin. And what is that? The marriage between you and Naruto. Chapter 15. Carnage was the only way to describe what was unfolding before Naruto's eyes. Around him, men and women fought what could only be described as walking corpses with their rotting flesh and missing limbs. The only similarity was their blue eyes. Naruto swung Kurama and cleaved one in half as he rushed it, before letting out a stream of fire from his mouth. Naruto was so focused on fighting for his life that he almost missed the flash of silver hair. Daenerys looked like a true Targaryen queen as she fought the dead. She showed no signs of fatigue as she swung her katana. She looked beautiful in her black armor, and with her hair tied in a single braid. The assassin stared at him for too long, and a horde surged toward him. Before he could react, he saw a flash of yellow, and 2 figures stood before him. One was unmistakably his mother, while the other was almost a carbon copy of himself. The 3 charged into the horde, and soon others joined them. Men in Lannister armor, Dothraki blood riders, and others Naruto didn't recognize. At some point, Daenerys appeared beside him, and they fought for what seemed like hours. His muscles ached, but he kept swinging his sword, but it felt like they never stopped coming. The assassin looked over and saw Daenerys staring back at him, but instead of her normal violet eyes that he had fallen in love with, he saw glowing blue eyes. Naruto dropped his sword as the fighting around him stopped, and everyone with him now had dead blue eyes. When he turned around, he felt a sharp pain as Kurama was shoved in his stomach by a man who seemed to be made of ice, and everything went black. Naruto woke up drenched in sweat. He was breathing heavily, and when he looked down, he saw his hands were claws. He felt the bed shift as Daenerys sat up and took his face in her hands. He tried to pull away, but she held him still, staring at his dark features. He could feel his canines shrinking, and the stinging in his eyes let him know his eyes were changing again. When he finished changing again, Daenerys pulled him down onto the bed and rested her head on her chest, her silver hair covering their bodies. We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. Naruto took a deep breath and shook his head. I'd rather not. Daenerys fell silent and listened to the beating of her heart. It was usually calm and steady, but now it was erratic, pounding against her chest. Before she could say anything, there was a knock on her door before Doria walked in with Jiraiya right behind her. It's too late, Jiraiya nodded. This couldn't wait. Tell them what you told me. Doria nodded and turned to the 2 of them. Earlier this evening, Zoro came to see me. He has a plan to get rid of you, Naruto, along with. She fell silent and Naruto growled. Spit it out. Doria looked at Naruto with fearful eyes. He wanted me to poison you and the twins. Naruto's eyes instantly reddened as he crossed the room to grab Kurama. Naruto, wait. The blonde stopped just as he was about to walk out the door. Wait, what, Danny? Let her try to kill me. Kill our babies. No. We used it. He thinks he has Doria on his side, so we used that. Naruto grumbled as he put his sword back where he found it, and Daenerys grabbed his arm. Doria, stay close to Zoro. Report to Lord Jiraiya or Master Edward. Doria nodded and left the room, leaving the couple alone with Jiraiya. Is there anything else, Lord Jiraiya? The wise old man nodded. Yes. Don't underestimate Zoro. If my information is correct, he may have orchestrated that witch attack. Naruto shook his head. That doesn't make sense. She gains nothing from Daenerys being locked up. It's true that there's still a lot to discover. Just be careful, you two. The 2 nodded and Jiraiya left the room and disappeared into the night. King's Road. The past few days had been interesting for Sasuke, to say the least. During the day, the group traveled, and at night, he trained Arya Stark under the illusion of a genjutsu. The girl was well trained in the art of water dancing, but it paled in comparison to his training and experience. One night, he told her they wouldn't go any further if she couldn't land a single hit on him, and that seemed to light a fire in her as each strike became more calculated, and she could tell he was studying her movements for patterns, and just did the killer smile. The sun was slowly beginning to set, and the grumbling was starting, but it all stopped when Sasuke raised one hand and the other went to the hilt of his sword. Everyone remained silent as they slowly approached the orange glow of a campfire. "And I went through all this trouble to prepare this meal for all of you." The black-haired assassin let out a sigh and walked towards the fire, taking a seat across from Kabuto. "Why are you here?" Kabuto ignored Sasuke and instead studied the group of children with him. "Let me guess, Arya Stark and Gendry Waters?" Arya gripped the hilt of her sword tighter, and Sasuke sighed. "Relax, girl. If I wanted you dead, I'd have had your head cut off by now," Kabuto laughed. "Ah, Sasuke, what a great sense of humor. Do you see me laughing?" Sasuke instructed the children to sit around the fire where his fellow assassin had a pot of stew cooking. "So, yes. Lord Orochimaru has asked you to return to King's Landing. I'm not done here. Yes, I know why I'll continue escorting your little group north." There was a brief silence before Sasuke responded. "We're not going north." Kabuto smiled as Arya looked at Sasuke in confusion. "You told me you would take me to my brother." "Yes, I said that. But what will you accomplish by going north now? Your water dancing training is incomplete, and if you meet anyone who has had a decent form of training, they'll cut you off. If you go home now, all of your hopes and dreams will die in this fire." Arya looked between the two assassins. "And where do you want to take me?" Kabuto's smile widened. "The hidden city, of course. Home of the Brotherhood, Karth." Naruto was dressed in his assassin's robes as he and Daenerys made their way to the Spice King's home. They were accompanied only by 2 Dothraki guards. "So, did you handle the misunderstanding with Eri?" "I'm working on it." Daenerys gave the assassin a small smile. "How are we going to get married if you're already taken?" Naruto snorted. "Eri and I aren't married. Even by Dothraki custom, I've never claimed her as my own, therefore, there is no marriage. Have you thought about it? Claiming her?" The blonde laughed. "Don't fall for that." Daenerys seemed to have more to say on the subject, but they arrived at the Spice King's estate where he was waiting for them inside. "I must say it was a surprise to receive your request to meet." The Khal and Khaleesi watched as the fat member of the 13 walked down some stairs towards them. "It seems we're off on the wrong foot, my lord. I put my faith in the wrong people and almost paid a heavy price for it." The Spice King nodded and indicated that they should sit down. "So what is it you came here to discuss? An alliance between the people of Karth and House Targaryen?" The man laughed. "What good is that to me? I'm just a merchant. I don't make any money from such a thing, except you will. My people have asked some questions, and until Zaro noticed, you were the richest man in Karth. You had more influence over the rest of the 13. But now, what do you propose? Karth law prevents you from making a move against Zaro yourself, but what if I took care of it?" The Spice King turned to Naruto, who finally decided to speak. "And how do I know you'll keep your word?" Naruto looked at Daenerys, who nodded. "Zaro is not who he describes himself to be. It's all a lie. All his riches are either fabricated or fake. What about your vault?" "I'm still working on it, but if I had to guess, empty." The man was silent for a few moments before speaking. "An alliance with Karth won't get you very far. We don't have an army," Daenerys smiled. "But you have riches and ships. We both need them." The Spice King swirled his wine for a few moments before looking up. "A ship, 5-1-3, deal." He and Daenerys shook hands, but before he could lean back in his seat he felt the tip of a blade touch his neck. He followed the blade until its owner looked into Naruto Uzumaki's narrowed red eyes. "You play any game with us and I'll do the same thing I did to the witches with you. Do you understand?" The man gulped and nodded, terrified because he never saw the blonde move. Naruto smiled as he and Daenerys stood up from their seats. "We will be in touch soon, my lord." Once they were outside, Daenerys put her arm around Naruto's. "You're getting better at that." Naruto nodded. "Yes, since what happened at the tower, I've been able to tap into this power. It still stings when I use it, but it's bearable." Danny nodded and the two walked in silence for a while before she looked back at him. "Now, what were we talking about before that meeting?" King's Landing. Night had fallen some time ago, but he pushed his horse to go as fast as he could. Kabuto had informed him that Stannis Baratheon had amassed a large army, and they were approaching King's Landing. He would have been there sooner, but he had to take a small detour around the Lannister army. but he arrived at the city bay just in time to see a flaming arrow streak across the sky. When it hit the water, it ignited into a green fire. What followed Sasuke could never be described as an explosion that rocked the bay, taking out a good portion of the Baratheon fleet. The assassin had to turn around, and the shockwave nearly knocked him off his feet, but instead, he stumbled upon his master, whose eyes were fixed on the carnage in the bay. Fascinating, isn't it? I must give it to Lord Tyrion, he's quite the dwarf. Do you think it's enough to make Stannis back down? Orochimaru's face was blank as he continued to stare out at the bay. No, Stannis will still land. It doesn't make sense, it's too far from the gates. Between the fire and the hundreds of archers they'll die, Miles. But the dwarf has played his little trick and he can only play it once, Sasuke nodded. Where do you need me, my lord? The Red Keep. Queen Cersei is there with some highborn women and children, including Sansa Stark. You go to that room and if anyone poses a threat, you eliminate them. Yes, my lord. The Uchiha started to leave but turned to see his master still staring at the green flames. He chose to ignore him and headed for the keep. It didn't take long for him to find his destination, as it was currently the only guarded room in the entire keep. From his position in the shadows, Sasuke could hear the clash of steel on the beach below, and silently began to prepare for the coming battle. The fighting only grew more intense, and Sasuke could tell the Lannister army was losing as the fight had reached the walls. He could hear a commotion in the room and saw the queen rush all the guards to leave with her. Not long after, Sansa Stark left and headed to her chambers. The assassin followed close behind her, and just as she closed the door, he heard footsteps behind him. Look what we have here! A little lord all by himself. Sasuke turned to the group of 4 men but remained silent. Look at his clothes, not a speck of dirt on them. Because I won't let scum like you sully them, the men laughed. Do you even know how to use that sword, boy? Come a little closer and you'll find out. One of them smirked and stepped forward before dropping his sword and grabbing his neck. The only noise he made was a gurgle as he fell to the ground dead. The other 3 men stared at Sasuke in shock as his sword was now unsheathed and blood trickled from the tip. For King Stannis, one of them charged, and Sasuke blocked its slash before spinning, spilling the man's guts in the process. He then quickly ducked under another slash and dropped to one knee, lashing out with a slash that ripped the man's leg off. Once the body hit the ground, he impaled his katana through the man's skull. Before he could draw his sword, the last man tried to cut him in half, but the Uchiha caught the sword in his palms, surprising him. Before the soldier could react, blue sparks ran down the length of the blade and made contact with him. The soldier could only scream as the skin on his arms began to peel before Sasuke ripped his head off. The Uchiha looked towards the carnage before looking up again. This time his Sharingan flared to life as he heard approaching footsteps and screams. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as an arrow flew towards him only to be deflected off his sword. The first Baratheon soldier reached him, but Sasuke blocked his attack and slashed the man across the chest. This caused the man to turn and kneel only for the assassin to insert his blade into the man's mouth. He then dragged his blade upwards, splitting the soldier's skull in half. He then ducked under a slash and swung his sword, slicing the man across his stomach. He quickly brought his sword up to block an axe strike and counterattacked by plunging his sword into the soldier's knee. He then turned to the wounded soldier who threw a weak slash, but Sasuke grabbed his sword hand and attacked with his katana and slashed the man's throat, while also grabbing his sword. Sasuke then used his newly acquired sword to block another attack, and before the soldier could react, the assassin used his katana to remove the man's arm, then threw the sword into the chest of another soldier who was running towards him. The next one tried to rush him as well, but Sasuke parried the blow and stabbed the man in the neck. He ripped his sword out and blood sprayed everywhere as he spun around, and the next man simply collided with his outstretched sword. Sasuke smirked as he took the sword from the now dead soldier and turned to the last remaining soldier, who roared as the Uchiha approached him. Sasuke swung both swords, but the man blocked them only for the assassin to use the momentum of the block to spin and attack with his swords again. The man was able to block the sword but never saw Sasuke's katana until it embedded itself in his stomach. The man looked into Sasuke's red eyes in shock only for the assassin to embed his second sword into his chest, and Sasuke continued thrusting until the man was against a wall. The assassin pulled his katana from the man's side and took a few steps back, observing the immobilized soldier. The man seemed to want to say something, but the Uchiha didn't give him the chance to cut the man's head off. Sasuke let out a sigh as he turned and looked at the carnage he'd left in the hallway before shaking the blood off his sword and returning it to its sheath. He then walked to the doors of Sansa Stark's chamber and stood guard, his Sharingan still activated. Karth. Naruto remained stone-faced as Doria and Zoro were led into the basement, both in tears. The group stopped in front of a large vault, and the blonde assassin glared at Zoro. "Open it!" Zoro glared back, but obeyed as he placed the key in the lock and opened the vault. Naruto let out a small laugh as he looked inside and realized that the richest man in Karth was a lie as the vault was completely empty. Dani turned to Zoro with a cold look on her face. "Thank you, Zoro Zoan Daxos. Thank you for teaching me this lesson." She nodded to the Dothraki holding Zoro and they began to guide him and Doria to the vault. "I am the king of Karth. I can help you now, truly help you. We can take the Iron Throne. I will bring you 1,000 ships. Please, Khaleesi, I beg you." Dani ignored his favor as the vault closed for them, but just before it closed completely, Naruto spoke. "Doria." The maiden's tears stopped instantly, and she stepped out of the vault and silently walked to stand next to Naruto. The blonde revealed in the expression on Zoro's face when the vault was completely closed on his face. Once it was closed, Dani turned to her handmaiden. "What did you learn?" Zoro was an ambitious man, but a man no less. Men speak when they are vulnerable. Zoro orchestrated the witch doctor attack, but he wasn't working with them, he was using them. He had benefactors, a group, but he only dealt with 2 men. Both wore black coats with red clouds. Dani looked at Naruto, who nodded. That was enough information for him, but he knew Jiraiya would probe the girl for more information later. The group returned upstairs, where the rest of the Dothraki were destroying the mansion. They approached Edward, who was studying a golden statue. "It's all a lie. It seems real enough to me, real enough to fool you." The former pirate smiled and the Targaryen held up a golden fruit bowl. "Real enough to buy a boat." Edward smiled. Or 2. In the corner, Naruto stood next to his teacher. "So what do you think?" Jiraiya's face was grim. "A group of people operating behind the scenes to take control of a city. I don't like it. Do you think they could have come back? It's too early to say. What I do know is that we need to improve his training."
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.